Welcome to the State of the Markets podcast. I'm Paul Rodriguez of thinktrading.com.
I'm Tim Price of pricevaluepartners.com.
And our very special returning guest is Glen Goodman.
Hello.
Hello. Brilliant.
Can you hear me, mother?
What was that again? Something in the 70s.
Oh, it might even be older than that. I think it might be George Formby. I was leaning on a lamppost in the corner of the street.
In case a certain little lady comes by.
Well, this is definitely going to have to be in the pod now. I mean, I can't not add it.
It's like two professional George Formby impressionists couldn't make it, so they'll have to make do with us.
It's funny you say that because I know a guy. You might know him as well, Simon. I've forgotten his surname. Simon, who I used to work with at Share Radio.
Simon Rose.
Simon Rose, yes. He is a kind of semi-professional George Formby impersonator.
No,
that is quite something to say.
that really is. We've got to find some of that media and stick a link to it. That's incredible.
I don't know why I said semi-professional. He's very much an amateur, George Formby, but he's part of a whole society, and they get together with their ukuleles, and he is George Formby, and other people take turns. It's a whole thing.
So, apart from your talents in the financial markets, do you have anything like that yourself that you can do?
I was in bands when I was young.
Really?
I was pretty cool. Yeah.
What did you play?
I played keyboards and I sang.
Okay, hang on. You said you were pretty cool. Now that's
this is the problem. It was the 90s when keyboards were quite out of fashion. You may remember.
Oh, I do. Yeah,
But they were hugely big in the 80s, to be fair.
Yeah, but that was I was too young for that, unfortunately. So
I was in a band as well, so I still have aspirations to make music.
All the secrets are cascading out this afternoon.
They are.
What was your band? What kind of music?
Yeah, rock, basically, kind of rock. Yeah, rock, and I'm writing sort of some heavy stuff at the moment, which sounds a lot like Iron Maiden, I've got to say. But yeah, you know what it's like. You never have enough time for it. But midlife crisis.
That kind of thing.
Well, not quite, no, but yeah. Well, I suppose yeah. Well, I'll play it to you sometime.
Priest.
I need to find a vocalist. It's very hard to get a good drummer, good vocalist. Very hard to come by. So yeah.
I had a friend at school who then is weird. He started off just as a normal guy, and then he went through some, like teenagers go through their identity crisis or whatever. He was just a very nice, sweet little guy, and then he turned into a sort of around the turn of the 2000s. There was this boom, you may remember, in really hardcore metal. Sort of, I don't even know what it was called. It was post death metal.
Grunge.
Oh, there's so many different names. It's like new speed.
But anyway, point is,
gent
he
or
became
something.
semi-famous. I won't say who he is I don't want to embarrass him, but he became kind of a bit famous, to the point where he's performing on, children's Saturday morning TV shows live and that kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
And so he's doing quite well. The band was like really hardcore band, and his thing was he did that screaming just non-stop, and then get this. It gave him a brain tumor.
What?
Sort of like he had to have an operation on his brain. He almost died because of the screaming, apparently.
What? How could it do that? That's incredible.
It could have been coincidence, to be fair.
Yeah, it could have been, I suppose, but the doctors thought it was probably that. But then I suppose they've got to blame something, haven't they? So.
Wow. Oh,
But he was only in his 20s. I mean, how many people get a brain tumor in their 20s? It's pretty
This is
rare.
true.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's yeah.
There's a lesson for you there.
Well, I was obsessed with how Kurt Cobain sang, and I wanted to be able to sing like that. So I took I got some DVDs to learn how to scream like him. I found out he basically just used to scream his head off, blow his voice out, and then that's how he sounded in the studio. So I don't know if there was any technique in it other than he was just gifted and that's what he did. But
cigarettes and scotch may help, I guess, as well.
Well, apparently Freddie Mercury did that. He thought his voice was too clean, so he tried to kind of, inverted commas, dirty it up. But it goes to show it's always what you haven't got, what you want.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's like, Freddie Mercury's voice was clean, but even after he spent 20 years smoking nonstop, it still sounded much the same, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So, are there are there any links to your performances anywhere that we could dig out?
There are not.
Okay. Oh, I bet
Luckily,
there
it
are.
was back in the days before people just recorded stuff on their phones.
But
so,
you have some, right?
Yeah, I've got some, obviously. I've got tracks I recorded in studio.
Can you send us one and we'll put it at the end of the pod for people
I haven't
to
even
listen
played
to?
my children the
Yeah?
music.
Well, then tell them to listen to
Even
the
though it was
pod.
proper
They'll learn something and they'll listen to it at the end.
I just can't bear. It's not so much. I mean, the music itself that I made is fine. I don't have a problem with them hearing that, even though it's very weird to the ear. I don't even know what genre it fitted into the stuff I was writing myself. But as I say, I recorded it properly in the studios with full production that I'd done on keyboards. And so it sounds good. But here's the thing is that the lyrics are so cringy that I just can't play it to my kids now. They're amazingly angsty.
I want to hear them now. It's just like I've got to hear them. It's just going to be great. Please. Okay, well we can debate that, but let's get on to the meat of the pod. Glenn, help us out. What the hell's going on in the world? Well, what should we be doing?
Was that just a general question to solve all the problems in the whole world?
Exactly.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, you've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, off you go.
Right. Okay.
Could you turn it into a song for us?
All right, here goes. We need some serious fiscal retrenchment. I mean, look, everybody knows what we need to do.
Serious fiscal retrenchment could easily be that difficult second album. It sounds like something Led Zeppelin could have done.
Yeah, it's Keir Starmer's impossible second album that he will never produce. It's just impossible. I think we're in an impossible situation because the voters, not just in this country but in most of the world, have not yet woken up to the fiscal reality. They just need a fiscal
Serious
reality
physical
check.
retrenchment.
Yeah, because it's like, look, we all know what we the people who study this stuff know what the problems are, but I don't think the people are ready yet, which is why, for example, Nigel Farage might bang on and on about immigration, and he professes to be a free marketeer and, a sort of sensible, somebody who spent time in the city and all the rest of it. But when push comes to shove, he ain't going to take away the boondoggles, is he? He's not going to take away things like the pension triple lock because he knows where his bread's buttered. And the problem is, as I say, it needs to come from the voters. And I was saying to a friend the other day that a country that did wake up finally was Argentina when they finally elected Javier Milei on a very open ticket of I'm going to take this literal chainsaw to all the spending programs. And indeed he did. He really did make savage cuts, and inflation is now at a sort of, still high, but at a tolerable level there. He's made as far as I can see positive steps, but it took the Argentine people a century to get to that point of desperation where they stopped voting for blatant spendthrift populists and voted for him instead. A century it took them to get that desperate.
But what about external factors like what we're seeing with the oil price and things that they can't really control and will cause inflation? Tim's been talking about inflation coming for a while, and clearly he's been right. But it's like everything comes at the wrong time.
What's your question?
Well, the question
Paul.
is
Paul.
like the answer isn't just simply that we need to spend less, because the consumer is under dual pressure then. And if you start to withdraw services, I don't know whether that necessarily makes things better at this point in time. So
you're right. It doesn't necessarily make things better at this point in time. The problem is that the bullet has to be bitten at some point, not just in this country, but as I say, in most of the developed world, or all the things that Tim has been prophesying for the past decade will come to pass. And that would be, pretty disastrous, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And given this kind of intractable situation that we're in, going back to how you kind of became famous in the world of finance by the little short that made you end up writing the Crypto Trader book. How close do you think we are to a big short for you and turning maybe 100,000 into maybe 10 million?
Oh, have I got the balls for such for such a move? I don't know. But look, we've been saying we're close for some years now, but this is the problem with the human brain, I think, is that people and participants in markets always seem to expect everything to happen much more quickly than it actually happens.
Yeah.
As soon as we start saying, oh, things are getting overheated, there's got to be a crash, that might be right as a general concept, but the human brain always causes us to assume once we've drawn that conclusion that it's got to happen quite soon. It's got to be, if not round the corner, at least, in the coming months or coming couple of years at most. But in fact, in real life, these things can drag on and on and on and on and then on some more.
That's why that Hemingway quote has become such a cliche now, the idea that, how did you go bankrupt slowly and then all at once? Because that's literally how it happens. It outstays, it outlives its welcome beyond all possibilities, and then it happens very, very quickly. And people are so used to the slow progress, they get completely caught blindsided when it happens overnight.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That happens in economic things. It also happens in politics as well. Countries can ossify for a very, very long time. And then, let's take an obvious example like the collapse of communism in the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet Union. It felt like the rot was going on. Well, the rot was going on for many decades, but then there's no real sign that it's about to end. In the late 80s, nobody knew if it was going to end or not end. I mean, there was no obvious sign it was ending, but then it just takes one little spark and the Hemingway bit comes true.
So I've just finished a commentary for next week, and I'm just going to give you a quick quote. So this is the first quiz question of the pod. Who said the following, and when did he say it? And I'll give you a clue. It is a prime minister, a British prime minister. We used to think that you could spend your way out of a recession and increase employment by cutting taxes and boosting government spending. I tell you in all candour that option no longer exists. And that insofar as it ever did exist, it only worked on each occasion since the war by injecting a bigger dose of inflation into the economy, followed by a higher level of employment as the next step.
I don't think it was Gordon Brown.
Annoyingly, I recognise this quote.
Higher inflation followed by higher unemployment. We've just escaped from the highest rate of inflation this country has known. We have not yet escaped from the consequences of high unemployment.
Just before Thatcher?
I'm not going to Google it. I'm not going to.
That's correct. It's Jim Callaghan to the Labour Party conference in Blackpool in 1976. And the reason I cite that is because, for ironic contrast, I thought, because I was reading the FT this morning out of a sense of wearied professional obligation. So the piece in question is from today's FT, which is the 5th of May 2026. It's a story entitled "Loyalists Urge PM to quote tax for growth unquote." Sir Keir Starmer must embrace quote taxing for growth unquote, and an expansion of state subsidised jobs to improve living standards. A member of his government has argued. Jeevan Sandher, an aide in the business department, is the guy in question. Entered Parliament in 2024 after a career as an economist in government and think tanks. Now, I won't have any more of a pop at Jeevan Sandher, but I would. This is the second question for the quiz for today. Who said and when did he say it, or she, if it was a she? I contend that for a nation to try and tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle.
I'm sure that was Thatcher.
Again, I know the quote, but can't remember who.
That's Winston Churchill. When did he say it?
I don't know, 1912.
He said it at a speech at the Free Trade Hall in Manchester on 19th February 1904.
Bloody
Even
hell.
earlier. Wow.
So what I'm saying is these perfectly straightforward, what we would call certainties and facts, they have to be discovered every generation.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah, everything's
Why is that? It's so annoying. It's so, that the older I get, the more irritating I find that. Like when I was young, I was just like, screw the old people. They don't know nothing. Like I was one of those people, and now I'm one of the I told you so generation. It's so annoying.
Well, in a lot of cultures, it was the elders that they looked to for this type of knowledge, and they respected them for it. I mean, that's what the Senate
Maybe
is about.
one of the biggest differences between European or Anglo-Saxon culture and Asian culture is that Asia has an appropriate respect for its elderly.
That is a big difference, exactly. Actually, something
They have a much longer term time frame as well.
Yes. The thing you just referred to when you were talking about the Jim Callahan quote reminded me of something from the other day. It's kind of a counterpoint to what we're talking about, because whilst things can fall apart slowly and then suddenly all at once, I think they can also sometimes do the opposite, and people forget that. Now, I have mixed feelings about Thatcher's rule. I approve of some parts of it and not others. But one thing you can say for sure is that Britain's reputation, reputationally, we went down the toilet when we went, as every newspaper ever likes to say, we went cap in hand to the IMF for a loan, right? Even now, when people write articles occasionally remembering it, they still use the phrase cap in hand. It's like essential. You have to include that. Now, I was laughing about this the other day with a friend of mine who works for the IMF. I'm able to say my man at the IMF, you see,
Wow.
because now I've got a friend at the IMF. And we were laughing about that, about how we were, everybody says we went cap in hand. But I said, what this also says is that reputations and the situation that a country finds itself in is not necessarily destiny, because it was literally only a few years after that the whole Thatcher revolution came on board, and we started having this whole new sort of loads of money generation growing up with, the Big Bang in the City of London. That's a good Big Bang for anyone who doesn't remember it, not a bad one.
Deregulation of the banks.
Yes, deregulation, exactly. And, and the whole reputation of Britain just turned itself around within a decade. And I think that's really hopeful, because however we feel right now about where our country's going, it could turn something. We don't know what. Maybe an inspirational new leader. Would be nice to have one of them turn up or some other factor. But, it's not necessarily destiny. People forget that you can actually curate the future of a country. You can steer it in a different direction. You don't just have to throw your hands up in the air and go, everything's screwed,
It feels difficult to pick the politician who might do that. It does seem to be none of the above at the moment, doesn't it?
It does feel that. That's why I wasn't willing to say, oh, well, maybe Nigel Farage is that guy or whatever.
Or
Because
Rupert Lowe.
he is.
I mean, Rupert Lowe, I've got a lot of respect for.
They're all. I mean, the problem with all of them, is that they're all obsessed with how they look in the media. That's it. That's what Dominic Cummings said for the 3,000th time the other day, and he's absolutely right yet again, that they are all, every single one of them, just obsessed with how they look in the media, and all thought of policy. It's such a kind of minor afterthought. Discussing ideas and policy.
I would draw a distinction between people who've had experience in business and people like our friend, the aforementioned Labour MP, that's only spent his entire adult life in think tanks and an economic fora. So that's I'd say that's the real reason why we have so many problems, is that the entirety of our current government has never had any experience of business.
I agree. That is an enormous problem. I think there should be a nice mixture of MPs. I think there's a place for academic economists and think tankers. And
yeah, it's at the bottom of the sea.
I kind of asked for that, really, didn't I?
Well, they did.
Yeah, and they did.
But if we go back to 2007 and when you were getting ready to put on your little short, and the details of this are on glengoodman.com, by the way. So I know we didn't do an introduction. So for people who've not heard Glen before, go to glengoodman.com and you can read all about what happened there.
You could have called it Glen Goodman's Little Shorts. That sounds quite sweet.
It's still available, unless I buy it before you get... that... I can't get that out of my head now. Sorry.
I'm just picturing, hot pants.
Oh, this is careering wildly out of control now.
It really is.
How about a pair of leather chaps?
Tim, it's your fault as well, by the way. It's your fault. And it is only 2 in the afternoon, and I'm saying I've not had anything yet, but I might do. But
You might have to at this
might
rate.
have to. So there would have been a point. I remember in 2007 there being this real sense that there was going to be a turn, and it'd come after the stock market, the property market, stock markets have been going up for a while, and it was the beginning of some really bumpy, volatile market moves. The Japanese yen, I think in the August, did a massive move and caught a lot of people out. And it was the start of what developed into 2008. It's that, for me, what we're looking for now as the kind of the edge of the volatility that's starting to predict that we are very close to this potential crash. And I just wondered.
Well, I'd
like,
be looking
I just
for.
want, I just want to unpick what you were looking at then and what you might be looking for now.
Well, here's the thing: is that markets top in different ways from a technical point of view. Just looking at the chart. So, Bitcoin, for example, has this repeated pattern of shooting upwards in a parabolic fashion, going pretty much vertical, and then collapsing in pretty short order. It doesn't always do that, and it didn't do that most recently with its recent high last year, but it does tend to do that. And so when it doesn't do that, it catches people out. Likewise, the stock market, well, I say likewise, anti-likewise, the stock market kind of tends to do the opposite. The stock market has a tendency to do what it did in 2008 and 2007 and and a few years earlier during the dot-com crash in 2000, 2001, which is that it tends to top out quite slowly over a prolonged period of maybe a year or longer. And that's what it did in 2007. So it was a wonderful opportunity for a short because I had so much time to prepare and just think it all through and decide what exactly should I be shorting. Well, as luck would have it, I chose banking shares. Well, not luck, I didn't toss a coin to decide what I was going to short. Obviously, the banks were in trouble, and I knew that. But
They took a while to top, didn't they, the banks?
yeah, it was brilliant. That's what
Yeah.
was so great about it, was
Yeah.
that half the world was in denial because the banking bosses kept going and doing interviews with TV correspondents like myself at the time. I was doing interviews with banking bosses where they were just saying, there's nothing to worry about. We've sorted out all our problems. It was just a liquidity issue, not a solvency issue. But of course, it was eventually a solvency issue for many of those banks. So, I just didn't buy what they were saying. But at the same time, being a trend following kind of trader, I didn't do the kind of crazy stuff that Michael Burry did, which was famously shown in, the Big Short film, which I think was kind of irresponsible, really, which is
Yeah,
that
I
he started
agree.
going majorly short while the market was still going up. And it went up and up and up. And there's this bit in the film where he almost gets his whole operation shut down. He's just a whisker away from losing his entire bet and losing everything, billions of dollars. And so, that story could have played out very differently. He could have been the man who was right, but got the timing wrong. And if you play that game, sooner or later, you will be the man or woman who's right and then gets the timing wrong and so loses anyway. I don't want to be that person. I want to be the person who's shorting when the market has already started turning and is just beginning its descent, which is what I did in 2008. So even though I'd already pretty much made up my mind on where the market was probably going to head by late 2007, I waited another sort of 6 months or so with,
Oh, really?
and I placed stop orders in the market so that if the market fell below certain levels, then those orders would be triggered, and they were orders to enter various short trades.
So 2008 was when you actually took the positions then?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting because we were right pretty much in the thick of it. There was a lot of people who were still denying what was going on at that point, even though the evidence was overwhelming that the system was in trouble. Given that back then the government...
Just to clarify, though, where the shorts I put on, I'd need to look it up to find out the exact dates, but I think it was somewhere between 3 and 6 months before the Lehman Brothers collapse. So it was, when I put them on in early 2008, because the market had started to turn downwards. As you say, people were starting to get worried. There were some early signs in the States with banks in trouble and that kind of thing, but we weren't going to reach the full Lehman.
Bear Stearns had already been rescued by then. I think Bear Stearns was during the spring of '08.
That's right. So we'd had Bear Stearns around that time, and
March
somewhat
16.
earlier, obviously, the Northern Rock collapse was the thing that's got me interested in the first place. I mean, that's the thing people forget. And whenever I do a kind of talk about this at a seminar or someplace like that, and people go, "How did you know in 2007?" It's like, well, there were queues outside Northern Rock because it was collapsing because of what was happening in the States. And that was, mid-2007. So there was ample warning to at least, if not to actually go short, but at least to start heavily investigating the whole thing. Any trader who's worth their salt should have had their eye on that from the moment that the Northern Rock problems happened.
I think the problem there also is the way that the people in charge say, "Oh, we've kind of solved this problem. Oh, yeah, here's the sticking plaster," because there are all the packages and everything that were deployed at that time. That's inverted commas solved the problem. But if you knew where to look and did your own research, you'd see that clearly that wasn't the case.
Well, you've beaten me to the punch, because the people who were in the best position, or that ought to have been able to say what was going on, were just as clueless as everybody else. And I'm sure it was Ben Bernanke who was asked in a TV interview what he thought the likelihood of a property correction was going to be. And he said, well, we've never had one. The implication being, because it never happened in US history, there would never be a coordinated national property recession. And that property recession had started before it even opened his mouth.
That is a classic academic economist response, isn't it? We've modeled this, and the model shows this can never happen.
So you've got, the behavior by some people is understandable. So I forget who it was. I think it was a Citigroup guy that said, for as long as the music's playing, you have to get up and dance. But that's like a commercial reality. So he's almost forgiven in my book for saying that. But the central bank, the role of the central bank is to stop the party before it really, before the wheels fall off. And in fact, they do the exact opposite, which is just when the wheels are about to fall off, they have to continue spiking the punch.
I mean, if I'm going to play devil's advocate for him for a minute, the problem people like him have is that they're not just people who are expected to tell us the truth, the harsh truth about what's going on. They have another role as well, which is actually influencing the market by every single word that comes out of his mouth. So it's kind of
the bottom line is that the role of a central bank at the end of a debt super cycle is impossible. It's impossibly difficult, and it's impossible, full stop. I would go further and say that I don't think the job should exist, but that's a separate issue that we can debate. But the bottom line is, it is irrational and it's stupid to believe that either one person or a team of committee can know the appropriate interest rate, the appropriate increase in the money supply for a complex, dynamic economy. Nobody can do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's all wild guesswork. The link between interest rates and inflation is still, in this day and age, quite poorly understood, in my opinion. And so they just kind of work with the rudimentary tools that they've got and take a stab at where interest rates should be. But the kind of conventional wisdom on that changes from decade to decade about what's the appropriate normal level for interest rates. I think that it's just a game that they have to play to sort of keep confidence in the economy going, I suppose.
It reminds me of Margaret Thatcher's quote about, if you can't buck the markets will buck you. I mean, she had an understanding that she couldn't control the markets, even though it was in 92 when Norman Lamont thought he could stop the pound from collapsing because they stuck their finger in the air and said that the Deutschmark against sterling should be at 285, and the Germans said that's too high, and they were like, no, we want it up there. And it was kind of pride that meant it was stronger than it should have been. And of course, it was an easy bet for the speculators to push it down. I mean, I'm not saying that in hindsight. It's just that when you know a little bit about foreign exchange, and around that time there was $1 trillion of trade per day, of turnover per day in the foreign exchange markets. And talking of the IMF, I think they went to the IMF for a bailout. I'm going to say 10 billion, but I don't think it was that much. It was probably a lot less. I mean, that was just last year, a few minutes trying to defend a currency. The Bank of England were kind of forced to do that. They're forced to try and defend the currency, which is it's just complete folly. It's a complete misunderstanding of how markets work. It'd be like trying to step in and, stop any market collapsing. Once people know you're on the other side and you're trying to do it, you've actually shown that you're weak, and they go for that weakness.
But also, it showed us another thing, which is that narratives, again, I come back to this just to give us a bit of hope. Narratives aren't destiny, because I remember clearly in 1992, when we crashed out of the ERM, the entire media framed it as like this huge national disaster.
Oh, yeah.
What are you gonna do? It was kind of like the day after the Brexit vote. Everyone running around screaming, "What are we gonna do?" And it's that's
like the end of the
how the
world.
media were kind of behaving. And yet, what happened as a result? Our currency was devalued to a lovely level. A lovely level that allowed British industry to thrive and set off this boom that went on and gave us the wonderful 90s that I still look back on with a little tear in my eye.
Absolutely right, because we had interest rates were being held artificially high to hold an artificial level of our currency, and not only that, sterling getting weaker was a boost to exporting companies, and
What are they, Grandad?
yeah, exactly. They don't exist anymore. But that's a very good point. But it was still, I mean, a weaker currency is seen as a bad thing, but it can act as a safety valve for your economy. And it's only when you try and block that, it causes tensions in the system, which is another story for what's going on in the euro and how it will eventually collapse. And that would eventually, I thought it would collapse within 5 or 10 years. I've been completely wrong. It's been going on for much longer. But I think the next big crisis is going to involve the euro fragmenting potentially, or another country maybe looking to leave, or maybe two. So, we've got a very interesting decade, end of the decade to come. And I think we're starting to see some chickens coming home to roost. They will be in terms of debt. But what worries me, Glenn, and Tim has already talked about this, and it's already in his kind of protection for the way he's got his portfolio set up. But the bond markets are doing some worrying things. Are you watching what the 10-year, 30-year yields are doing?
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting because, I mean, I don't know when you're going to put this podcast recording out, but so it may no longer be the case at the time you put it out. But as we speak today, the 30-year has gone, or the price of 30-year. Well, all right, let's talk about the yield. So the 30-year yield has gone higher than it was when Liz Truss did her supposed disastrous moves, and again, it was like the media were like, "Oh, everything's collapsing. The whole of Britain. She must leave. She must not be the prime minister for 1 second longer, or we're all dead." Kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And even at the time, I kind of thought, "Oh, okay, look, we're having a spike here. The markets are panicking slightly, but can we at least let the dust settle before we make any rash moves and replacing her as prime minister?" Not that I was that fond of her. I wasn't really fond of her at all. But even so, it just seemed, it's not good to do rash things, and the media kind of forced that. And now we're in a position where the yield is actually even higher than the point that she forced it.
I think they'll be able to get away with that, because I think Sir Keir Starmer's taken out a private, I was going to say private prosecution, but he's taken out a D notice, so nobody can talk about the spike in 10-year and 30-year gilt yields. So it's fine, because no one's allowed to make jokes about it or anything.
I barely see it mentioned, I have to say. It isn't really in the news, is it? Because it's happened gradually, you see. That's the thing. Gradual disasters don't really make the news. Only sudden ones do.
But the bond market never makes the headlines. It's always the stock market that calls the shots.
That's very true. Yeah, well, probably because most people don't know what a bond is. That's.
But we
probably
are
the-
seeing this across the board. So it isn't just a UK problem. Actually, that reminds me. What do you think of Gary's economics?
Oh, don't get me started.
Oh, hello. I've touched a raw nerve.
Um,
Because he's I don't think he's a stupid guy,
No, he's definitely not a stupid guy.
but he's pushing
it's all
for
bluff and bluster
he's
and
pushing for Zach Polanski.
statements. He's pushing for Zach Polanski.
Well, he seems to be, yeah. I mean, yeah. I guess because I suppose his agenda is that he wants equality. He wants to create equality. So
I somehow doubt that he wants to give away the money he's amassed over the last few years.
absolutely not.
Yeah, he'll just cheerlead Zach Polanski from a tax haven. I imagine is the future for that guy.
So I mean, what is your take on him? Because he's an interesting character, that's for sure, and I think his motives seem to
Whenever
be
he's
admirable.
face-to-face, whenever he goes head to head with, like, there was a famous interview some months ago where he went head to head with, I forget the name of the guy, but
Oh,
a
yeah.
guy,
I
a
know the
guy
one.
who's sort of a businessman and knows a fair bit about economics, and they went head to head, and I
On the
did
Steve
watch some of
Bartlett
that.
on the Steve Bartlett podcast. Is that the one?
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, it exposed him somewhat because for once he actually had someone who knew what they were talking about to go up against. And he was found wanting, which you would expect because most of his ideas are ill thought out and make little sense, and all he does is just show off the whole time. about how he made money and he was from from the streets, and then I came from the streets and then I went to Oxford, and at Oxford I learned that it was all rubbish. Everything that every clever person has ever thought is a load of rubbish. I realised we've got to throw it all out and replace it with the bollocks that's coming out my mouth right now. That's pretty much sums up Gary as far as I can tell.
Okay, interesting. And
Put you down as an unsure.
Look, I just think he's one of those people who, he's just out for the main chance. He's saying the things that he needs to say to kind of shock people and get interviews. And I came across him a few months ago because he was filming a documentary that I just happened to walk through the set of.
really, okay, he's
Channel
talked about
4,
that.
Yeah, Channel 4 filming a documentary
Yeah.
about his trading, and he's going around and meeting traders and meeting ordinary people.
So he could have met you, and that would have been cool, wouldn't it? What would you have said to him?
I would have said, Gary,
You're talking bollocks, mate.
get real, mate.
Milk, no sugar, please, Gary.
I don't know.
I like some of his ideas, but I think he's just way over the top. He goes for the sensationalist kind of approach.
So he's like a Farage of the economics world, then.
Oh, that's harsh. That's a low blow.
I actually prefer Farage's economics to Gary's economics, but I don't know. I'd rather have Gary running the country than Zach Polanski,
Yeah,
because Zach
definitely.
Polanski genuinely knows nothing about economics. I think people need to understand, and unfortunately, most voters don't really think of economics as sort of a key skill that a politician needs. And I think that's because we've taken it for granted so much that they all do understand economics. But nearly every prime minister has at least some grasp of it, right? Now, Zach Polanski, if he were to become prime minister, would be the first person who really doesn't know. He doesn't know how things tick. I don't know if you watched that. I mean, I'm not a fan of The Rest is Politics, but I watched the interview that they did with Zach Polanski, where Rory Stewart just couldn't believe his ears because he was asking about things like the debt and the deficit, and it was pretty clear that Polanski didn't know left from right or up from down, and wasn't really that bothered either. He fights back whenever one of his critics or any interviewer says, well, I wasn't very happy with his answer on that, whatever. Polanski and his fans will be the first to pile right in and go, this was a biased interview and all that kind of thing. It's really worrying me.
I think it's odd that he's changed his name.
I mean, that's the least of our worries, surely, that he changed his name. I mean, he changed his name because he wanted to make a point about not being embarrassed about his Jewishness, and because I think it was his father or his grandfather or something had adopted an anglicized name, so he wanted to go back to the original. So I'm
Oh,
not sure Polanski, of all the
Yeah,
names.
of all the names you could choose to put yourself, put clear blue water between yourself and claims of irregularities, then
but
the
surely,
word the name Polanski is not one you'd be top of the list. It's
No,
like
not really.
I've rebranded myself Hitler because I don't want to get a reputation for, like I said, political dodginess or anything.
Yes, you're going back to your family's ancestral name. That's very honourable, yeah.
if he'd done that, if he'd actually found his family ancestral name, then that would have
Yeah.
been fair enough. I didn't know
Yeah.
actually what was
I'm going
behind
to
it.
change my surname to Glitter. Well, actually, I'm going to double barrel it. I'll make it
Savile Glitter.
Savile Glitter.
I just quite like Timmy Glitter. I think that works.
Well, that could easily be. I could easily be on Saturday morning TV with a name like that.
I can hear the BBC ringing you now. The phone's
Timmy
ringing.
Glitter's Big Bat.
Oh, dear. So I think we need to talk about cryptocurrencies, Glenn, as well, because a lot of people have been saying that this is it and Bitcoin's going to zero, and various There was a podcast on the Diary of a CEO where a guy was saying exactly that because of the use of energy. Now, I wondered whether the correction that we was, well, I was wondering because of the correction I thought might have come about because, of course, energy prices going up means it's more expensive to actually mine Bitcoin, and there's been this correction potentially because of it. So I don't know whether that's correct. I'm more technical, but I kind of think
Oh my
that
God, it's
maybe there's
Steve.
some ideas.
Sorry, I've just Googled what you were talking about, and it's Steve Keen, who was the interviewee on
Yeah.
Diary of a CEO. I know he's an Australian economist, and I've chatted with him many times in the past.
Oh, brilliant.
And I found his ideas quite interesting about a decade ago because he'd basically, I mean, you'll probably take a sharp intake of breath as soon as I tell you this, but he was sort of allied with the MMT economic theories about a decade ago, modern monetary theory, i.e., that's the idea that you can just keep printing money and it will be okay. And it won't cause massive inflation. But the thing is, at the time that he was really pushing these ideas, about a decade ago, there was a kind of a little window where, because the way he explained it to me, and he had this lovely little model that he'd created on his computer, and he showed it to me on his laptop, and really it was really important that it just involved small amounts of printing, right? The idea being that you print a small amount. This is sort of in normal economic times. The idea is you would be printing small amounts, and those small amounts would help to buoy up the economy, buoy up economic growth. And through buoying up economic growth, then you basically end up with a pretty stable money to GDP level because GDP is going up and money supply is going up. Now, obviously, these sound like quite old ideas, and they are quite old ideas, but he sort of refined them and worked out how it could work, practically speaking, and how you would tweak the amount of money printing up or down, that kind of thing. Now, I don't know what he's saying recently because I haven't been paying attention to him recently, but I'm assuming that he no longer thinks that is necessarily going to work in current conditions. But I might be wrong, and certainly I could see him here on Diary of a CEO saying, yeah, as you say, Bitcoin will go to zero. So what was his argument there? Without me watching the whole thing, why does he think Bitcoin will go to zero?
In the snippet that I listened to, and I admit I didn't listen to the whole thing, he said because of its requirement for energy, which is what I heard Taleb saying a good couple of years ago when it was around $15,000, and
Right.
and then has since gone quite quiet on the whole thing.
So he thinks that Bitcoin will go to zero because it uses too much energy.
Yeah, because it requires energy to keep the system going, and therefore it's not like a piece of gold that can just sit there. Look, I'm kind of trying to make his argument when actually I don't know what his argument is, other than it just requires energy. I mean, so does the internet, so does all banking, so does everything else that we do, so do credit cards, so do computers. Everything needs energy. So I don't see what I don't. It seemed to be a fundamental misunderstanding of the way Bitcoin and the mining systems work. Because
Or is it possibly a reflection of the fact that as the market evolves, it requires exponentially more energy to create the same amount of Bitcoin, and therefore, even without a high inflation, high energy price world, the thing becomes sort of doomed.
well, that would be
Okay.
if you thought that's not actually how it works. You see, because it doesn't necessarily see that the I'm sure Glenn can explain this better than me, but my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that what they are doing is they're kind of solving a mathematical problem in order to mine the Bitcoin.
Correct.
And that mathematical problem can be made harder or easier depending on the number of miners that are out there.
That's
So,
correct.
so if they were in a position where miners were deciding that it was too expensive to do it and taking too much energy, then they just make the problem easier. So you could effectively do it on your laptop, which is what you could do right at the beginning, but you can't do that because it's so competitive. So that's why.
That's right.
So this argument didn't really make a lot of sense to me, and it just suggested that they didn't really understand it. Now I've
He
always
doesn't. I've just watched the clip
okay.
while listening to you.
So
His argument
that's the
was so
presenter in
his
you that could
argument
do
was
that.
so simple and wrong that I watched the entire minute clip of him on the Diary of a CEO while listening to everything you're saying, and I could take in both simultaneously because it was like listening to a child's argument. Steve, you've shamed yourself. You don't know what you're talking about. He says his entire argument is Bitcoin is it has to go to zero because it uses too much energy, and he says, and I quote, according to climate scientists, we are using too much energy and we will need to use less energy in the future. And so, one of the easiest ways to save energy would be to stop mining Bitcoin. That's like an easy win for the world to stop using so much energy.
Yeah, the moment you
What are
start
you
appealing
talking
to climate
about?
scientists, you've already
What
lost
is
the
he
debate, haven't you?
talking? I mean, that's an insane thing to say for an economist. I would expect him to know a lot more about the global energy market and global energy needs and global energy supply. It's like it's absolute basics that the world is going to use more and more and more energy. It's probably going to start using exponentially more energy if AI becomes as huge as is predicted. But the beauty of it is, Steve, that contrary to whatever climate scientists he's been listening to, the beauty is that we are developing renewable energy sources that are getting more and more efficient. They're still not quite there yet, but in a few decades' time, solar energy will be much more efficient.
Well, nuclear
Nuclear
is already
energy.
there.
Nuclear, exactly. People are already building out nuclear in the countries that know what they're doing, not the ones that are blind, like Britain and Germany and those kind of places. But the countries that want to have a future are building out nuclear. They're building out other renewables at the same time as still harnessing the fossil fuels that we need in order to make this very long-term transition. I mean, all of this is economics basics. I can't believe that Steve King just ignores all of that and says, yeah, the climate scientists say we've got to use less energy, so I think Bitcoin's going to go to zero because we'll have to stop mining Bitcoin because it uses too much energy. I mean, I don't know where to start with that.
Yeah. So right now, I hope to put this pod out actually quite quickly. The kind of move down that we saw recently in Bitcoin, again, there was a lot of people saying, it's going to go all the way down to like maybe 30,000, maybe below, all the sort of usual calls. And then, of course, it turns around and we're trading around 81,000 as we speak. Do you think this is do you think the correction's over, or are you just sitting back watching it and trying to, fairly neutral on it? What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I'm a trend trader, so there's no way that I'm buying while it's, on its knees. As we speak at the moment, it's making a sort of what you'd call a medium term or short to medium term recovery, I suppose. But the pattern is, still bearish. We're still, until further notice, in a bear market for Bitcoin and crypto at the precise moment I speak. Though, it is climbing back into territory that it hasn't been in since the beginning of this year. So that is, a positive sign, whichever way you look at it. I would need it to go somewhat higher before I could conclude that the bear market is over. At the moment, this could just be a bear market correction. And we know, of course, from all the bear markets that all three of us have traded for decades, that whenever there's a nasty bear market, you very often get or sometimes get these huge upward rallies. And this is why whenever people ask me about shorting, which they inevitably do because of what I did in 2008, they always go, oh, should I be shorting cryptos all the time? Then is it great to do shorting? And I say, no. I say shorting is something I believe should be done. You should pick and choose your moments to short. Whereas going long is something that you can do pretty much habitually with most assets, apart from when they're in strong bear markets. The problem with shorting is that it doesn't work most of the time if you were to try and sort of employ it as a constant method of trading without going long at all. You'd have a hard time in most markets, in most asset classes, right? Whereas and that's for a whole bunch of different reasons, but one of those reasons is those nosebleed rallies that it has, and Bitcoin may just currently be undergoing another of those nosebleed rallies, which has taken it from 60k to 81k. So I suppose what I'm saying is, at this moment in time that you're interviewing me, I'm non-committal. I'm waiting. But I can talk about some individual cryptos if you like, because I'll tell you why. Because I had a quick look back at the last interview we did, which was almost a year ago now, because I wanted to remind myself, because I remembered you asked me about what cryptos are you looking at? Which ones do you think might break out and be good buys? And at the time, I said XMR, Monero, which is what's called a privacy coin. I also said
brilliantly.
Yes, and BNB was another one, which is Binance's coin, and also Tron, TRX. Now, what happened after that interview was XMR doubled and then collapsed back again just as quick.
But it went up a lot.
It went up a lot, really, really fast.
The Glen Goodman effect, we're calling that.
Another one, the other one, BNB, also doubled after after I suggested that it might go up, yes. And Tron is up about 50%, TRX, from that point as well. So all three of those did well. So that gave me a bit of, once I listened back to that and realized, that gave me a bit of confidence. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll tell them about a few that might do well in the future, just so I can get egg on my face next time I come on the podcast. What do you reckon?
I definitely want your predictions. Did you? So because you don't just talk about the markets, you actually trade. So you would have bought those, right? So that's brilliant. And were there any that you bought that didn't quite work out, and you would have just had to bail out the position?
Well, those were the only three that I mentioned on the pods, because those were the only three I was interested in at that point in time. I'm stalling for time here because I can't remember.
No, that's fine. But so why those three then? How come you?
Because the market was, it made a top, and it. I suppose after I spoke to you, after that podcast, the market did go higher and it did make a top. But even as it was doing so, I was getting worried because momentum didn't seem to be growing, right? I wanted to see the market going parabolic like it usually does in these bull market scenarios. And yet it was actually kind of slowing down. So it was still going up, but in a less and less convincing kind of way, like as it was starting to make a top, it seemed like, which is in fact what happened. So I was quite cautious with my trading. And the reason I can't really remember what other cryptos I was buying and selling at that time is because I was in and out of quite a few. There were some, false starts and cryptos that didn't go the way I wanted them to. It's just really a stroke of luck, I suppose, that the three that I mentioned on your podcast did do well. But I'm not saying that means that, I only spot good cryptos. I'm pretty sure I probably bought a few others that I then sold really quickly with tiny losses because, as anybody will know who's listened to any of my other podcasts with you lot, so I don't want to go into too much detail because I've said this 50 times before.
Or read
but,
your book.
Read my book. But yeah, cutting losses is, as for many traders, it's my number one rule. So any cryptos that I did buy that didn't do what XMR and BNB did last year, I would have cut those out of my portfolio very, very quickly as soon as they started going into a loss, because I believe very strongly that lots of small losses you can deal with and handle, and they get outweighed by big profits on other trades. But once you start getting big losses because you hold on desperately in the hope that it will go back up again, and then eventually you have to cut that loss because it gets large and you realize it's not going back up again, big losses are much more difficult to recover from, obviously, because you need tons of big wins in order to cancel out the big losses and then have a few extra to get you into profit.
So with the chart of Bitcoin, before we go on to the other ones that you're interested in the moment, at the moment, from what I can see, the way I'm reading this technically, we're in a downward trend that started on the 6th of October. I'm looking at a weekly chart, and 6th of October 25 topped out at 120 odd thousand, and then traded down to a low of what we got here of 59,000 on my system here.
Yeah.
Now, so from there, it's sort of wound sideways. It had a big collapse into that 59,000, which looked to me a bit like a spike low. So I was interested in whether the market could get lower than that kind of, invert commas, panic down to that level, which it didn't.
It definitely could get lower, because actually the volumes on that collapse you're talking about were really quite small compared to volumes that we experienced in the previous boom and crash in 2021, 2022. Even on the lows at 2023, there was a bear market low where the volumes were, I think, around about double the volumes that we saw recently on the collapse to 59,000. So what I'm saying is I'm not sure we've seen full capitulation yet. We don't necessarily have to. You don't always get full capitulation. And if I were looking at this from a purely technical perspective, without any kind of information about how the world is and how markets are going, if I was just looking at this chart of Bitcoin, I would say it's in a bear market. Chances are this is just a bear market rally, and then it will collapse even further, and it's got a long way to go, time-wise, maybe a year or more before it reaches rock bottom and blah, 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 and then it starts again and you get a new cycle and it goes to another high. That would be what I would infer from the way the chart looks. But the problem is that I can't help but let the real world interfere in my thinking. And the real world, as far as I can tell, is still in a kind of a melt up for stocks, right? I mean, we're not quite in David Hunter style total melt up territory yet.
But that requires a bit of a crash first, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, gold is going through a significant correction at the moment, but it's the kind of correction I can imagine, because it had such a massive capitulation in March, volume-wise. I could very easily imagine gold coming back from this current correction and going way higher. I look at the stock market. I imagine that could go way higher, depending on what Trump does next, which is always an unknowable. But the market is very keen to think only good things. If you look at the movements of the stock market, every time anything remotely positive happens in the Middle East, the market goes up. And every time something negative happens, the market might have a bit of a correction, but it's not that big a deal. And that says to me that traders and investors are generally still pretty bullish. And we know that they've been huge injections of capital in recent times. And then you look at the crypto market, and it's still in a bear market, but it does tend to be dragged up with other asset classes like stocks and gold. And So because stocks are doing so well, I'm kind of loath to just conclude that this bear market will continue. Oh, I don't know. I mean, what I'm
Yeah.
telling you, I suppose, is I'm very much in two minds, and I will be led by breakouts in individual cryptos because, if I just carry on trading breakouts like I always have, then fingers crossed, everything will turn out all lovely one way or the other. Whereas trying to predict the direction of the overall market is just too hard at the moment because, like I say, we're in a bear market for crypto, and yet the stock market is booming, and the stock market does tend to drag crypto upwards. So that's why I'm torn on that.
Do you think that what's happening in the stock market is a reflection just of, for want of a better phrase, animal spirits? Because I find it difficult to get more upbeat about the outlook for economies or for growth or for inflation in light of the real mess that's developed now in the Strait of Hormuz. It seems to me that the market is wildly complacent and probably heading for a fall.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a massive bubble. Of course, I've been thinking that as you two have for many years now, and it just becomes more and more bubbly all the time. The
Which in a sense
narrative
is when it becomes
changes.
most dangerous because it becomes so wildly irrational. It'll suck in everybody for that one last surge.
Yeah, I guess soon, but it's felt like it's soon for ages. We probably 4 years ago I was saying, oh, I think soon, but it's the thing is the AI excitement hasn't died down yet. Investment in AI is still going great guns. And all of that is pushing up valuations. I think what will probably happen is more or less the same thing that happened in the dot-com crash. Maybe I'm being a little biased there because I lived through the dot-com crash, and we know that human beings tend to extrapolate from their own experiences to predict what will happen in the future. But I can't help but see the strong similarities. And the similarity is this, that huge investment went in the years leading up to the dot-com crash in 2000, 2001, because loads of investors saw that there was a fantastic future and that things were about to change dramatically. And guess what? Things did change dramatically. The real world did change enormously. The internet really did take over and all the rest of it. But what we did was the thing going right back to one of the first things I said in this podcast, that human beings have a tendency to think things are going to happen more quickly than they actually do. And that is the key thing we need to remember here. It was the key thing that caused the dot-com crash because, frankly, all the gains from the internet were going to come way down the line, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, whereas investors expected results quick. And when they didn't get them, the market crashed. I suspect a similar thing will happen here. I don't think AI is going to transform the world anywhere near as quickly as its proponents think it will. I think it will transform the world in a massive way. I really do, because I've studied it a hell of a lot and I understand it, and I think it has that kind of potential. But I just think it will happen far more slowly due to real world inertia, real world bureaucracy, and real world people. Just everything's going to slow it down. Just that's what happens in life.
That's really interesting that you've done your research on AI. I would have probably guessed, but I'd love to come back to that. But just before we do that, I wanted to just from a technical point of view. I'm sorry, I know I'm kind of pressing the point slightly on the Bitcoin chart, but I know that your instincts in terms of what to do in the markets are very, very good, and sometimes it's very hard to explain why you feel the way you do. But when I was looking at the Bitcoin chart and just describing that downward trend and that final move, I thought the final move, which ended in February, that spike down, to me, that weekly bar and the way it did that was an ending signal for that bear trend. But it was confirmed by the market going sideways. Now that sideways move could have also been very kind of rising wedge style, which would then imply a move lower. But it then broke the downward trend line that if you draw a line from the top of August into the previous little correction, which came in January, then if you extrapolate that line down, the market's gone through that. Now, the next resistance point that you'd look at would be the low of November 17th, which is at 80,000, which it's just pushing through now. So the reason why I'm describing all of this is because it's broken the downward trend line. It's making a new upward trend. It's not doing it very fast, which is a bit of a concern. But now it's like, is it a question of you saying it's in a bear trend because you're looking at it from the top, or is it in a bull trend because you're looking at it from the low that it started at around November 22? It's in an upward trend from there. So which one takes precedence? Now, I think it's absolutely fair enough that you say it's not decided, because it does feel a bit strange. And I think instinctively, it doesn't feel like the right trade to go long at this point. But then if it goes another 5,000 points to the upside, when do you decide, actually, I'm going to jump in, if at all?
Well, all I can tell you at this point is that when you look at that chart, say on a weekly chart, if you zoom right out to 2022, like you're talking about, my experience, my long experience of markets, of staring at charts, tells me that that break that happened in November.
In November, yeah.
Broke the trend. I'm sorry, I don't know, Tim. I don't know if you're near a computer and a chart of Bitcoin, but do you agree with me? Because to me, it looks like that trend broke, and that was the end of the main trend that had started in 2023. I can't see it any other way. I can just about tell. I mean, I know what you're trying to say, Paul, that that maybe this is just a really savage correction in that trend that started in 2023, but I don't think that trend from 2023 was long and fierce enough to justify a correction of this magnitude within that same trend. Am I just being kind of pedantic here about the definition of trend? I don't know. I mean,
no, you've got to be pedantic. That's the point. No, there's no right or wrong definition. There is your definition and what you use. And I think of charts as like photographs. You know, whenever you go to take a photograph, a different photographer will see different things and look at it in a different way. So,
I mean, volume is still quite weak.
No, there's lots of reasons to be cautious, that's for sure. And one of them being the oil prices have just, spiked higher as well, which is another factor against it. But it was more that let's say it goes another 5,000 points to the upside, do you then become interested, or does it have to break the 120,000 for you then to say, okay, we're now going to go to 150?
No, it doesn't need to break 120, but I would be a lot happier if it broke that peak that you can see that it made in January, right, which is at about 98,000.
Right.
You see, because as I like to talk about when I'm explaining how to trade to people, over the years I've just found various different methods to try and explain trend to people, because they always want it defined. Like, how do I know if it's a bull market? How do I know if it's a bear market? And to me, and you too, because we've looked at so many charts, I expect you just look at a chart and go, that's a bull market, that's a bear market, right? But it's not always that way for beginners, because they're not used to looking at, especially when they're looking at candles as opposed to lines. It's not always clear to them which way the thing is going, unless it's a really, really obvious one, right? The fringe cases are really difficult for people. So one of the methods that I've developed, or not developed, I didn't invent it, but one of the methods I've used over the years is higher highs, higher lows, lower highs, lower lows, right? Just describing it as a sloping staircase is a good way for people to visualize it. So what you want to see is in a typical trend, you want to see the line go up to a high, and then it will have a correction, sort of say it goes down 30% from that upward move that it just had, and then you get your low, but then it needs to climb to a higher high, and then it needs to fall to a higher low, i.e. the next correction doesn't go as far down as the previous one did. And that way you form this kind of sloping staircase. And likewise, it works just like that on the way down as well. So for Bitcoin, looking at it from using that kind of model, we need to see it break 98,000 in order to break the series of lower highs and lower lows that it's currently making. It's on a sloping staircase downwards at the moment. And in order for us to conclude, okay, it's maybe not in a bear market anymore, we need to see the sloping staircase stop being a sloping staircase. We need that needs to end. That's how I would define it.
That's brilliant. And in terms of
I
sentiment,
want to ask Tim if he agrees, because I know you invest in trend following funds, even if you don't trend follow personally yourself. But does that sound like it makes sense to you from a trend perspective?
I defer to both you guys in relation to reading of the charts, but looking at a very crude, just purely price chart of the last few years, to me, there's a trend line, a supporting trend line that broke maybe the end of 2025, but certainly late 2024, and I wouldn't be a buyer. But I don't even know enough about the market to know
Late
whether I should have a view.
2024? Do you mean late
I'm just
2025?
I'm just, yeah, there's the end 2025. It looks a little bit to me like a bit like a sort of a Head and Shoulders formation. Then
Yes.
we went quite a bit below that in early 2026, and
Exactly.
that does not look like a positive chart to me. But that's just that's on the face of it, and I say I'm no expert in this area.
So Paul, you like your charts as well. So you are more optimistic, or were you just playing devil's advocate there?
no,
Well,
I was just interested in how you were reading it. And you see, one of the ways you could read that correction is that you've got an ABC style. You've got 3 waves down. So
Yeah.
the fact that it's actually just pushing over this 80,000 level at the moment invalidates, or could be invalidating, it as a primary trend. Now, if David Hunter's also right, and if equities and everything else go a lot higher, we might be staring at that 98,000 thinking, actually, you know what, that breakout at 81 now looks pretty good. So that's all that's going on in my head right now. And I'm looking at sentiment
No, I
as well.
agree with you completely, and that's why I'm looking at, as I say, because the Bitcoin chart is just too uncertain from a technical perspective. That's why I'm much more interested in looking at other smaller cryptos that are making nicer setups and might provide us with nice breakouts, or at least have patterns that appear to be more bullish than Bitcoin itself. Bitcoin was definitely the trade to do from 2023 to 2025. It was by far the most reliable of all the big cryptos in terms of trend and so on. That's no longer the case. And so I'm just looking at others that just might make better buys. But yeah, for the first time in quite a while, I'm looking at possibly buying cryptos again. And I can tell you about which ones whenever you're ready.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just before we do that, on the sentiment, I look at CoinMarketCap and it's got the fear and greed index. I'm guessing that's bread and butter for you.
I mean, there are various fear and greed indexes, and a lot of them. The funny thing is, there was this one that was on a website that everybody used to look at. Everyone in the crypto world would live by this index, the fear and greed. It went between 0 and 100 because it always seemed to look sort of vaguely correct, And one day I thought, but everybody's always looking at this fear and greed. I've got to find out how they calculate it. So I go to the
Some
website.
guy with his finger in the air.
It might not even, we don't even know who it is. I don't even know who the guy is. There might not even be a guy.
Oh, man.
Like, it's just, it was remarkable that this website had no kind of person behind it. And it was calculated in completely inscrutable ways. And yet the whole crypto world treated it like it was gospel. And I just despair sometimes of, I don't know. People just believe what they want to believe. The CoinMarketCap one is the one I look at most now because at least they tell you how they calculate it, and again, it seems to kind of generally go along with sentiment fairly well. Today, as we speak, I'm looking at it and it says 50 neutral.
Exactly.
Which perfectly sums up my own attitude towards the Bitcoin chart, I guess.
Yes. I noticed fairly recently, in the last sort of month or so, that there were a few cryptocurrencies that were of the altcoin variety that were breaking out whilst Bitcoin wasn't really doing a whole lot. And it was quite surprising. And I think what you were saying about when Bitcoin doesn't look right, you're going to look at other things. It's just very, very sensible. And it's one of the advantages of being able to look at the market from a technical point of view, because you could just pivot away from what you're not sure to something that looks, like a much better, cleaner setup. Even if it doesn't turn out to be a good trade, at least it looks like a good trade. and you've got a better risk reward to put on that trade. So with that in mind, have you noticed Luna Coin and what that's been doing?
Yeah.
Because
There's
that's
something
mental.
that, but I mean, I took one look at it and thought I don't want to have anything to do with that. After after its past collapse and court cases and oh
I
Lord,
mean, what the hell is going on? I mean,
I don't know. It's just people being people, or traders being traders, trying it on. Oh, let's have a crack at that. I mean, is it really any different from what happened last week with what was the stock that just
GameStop?
no, not GameStop this time. It zoomed up and then went all the way back down again, like a really Avis, the
Oh,
car,
yes.
the car hire, just like the price went crazy last week and then just went all the way back down again. I mean, insane. These things happen from time to time when you've got a lot of gamblers in the market, I suppose.
Yeah. It's for people who don't know, this is a collapsed coin, which it was Terra Luna, and then somebody worked out a way to short the market, and they found a flaw in the system. I can't remember what it was. Glenn, you probably know much better than me.
Yeah.
But what happened was it went from being a really strong coin to just collapsing in short order, and then it's gone to sort of decimal points worth of value, like 0.0000 point whatever. And then, but just recently, so you think it's dead, and then all of a sudden the chart's showing that it's flying high. I mean, it is probably just noise, like you say, but it's also kind of weird that it's doing it.
Yeah, it is weird that it's doing it, and without going into too much technical detail, yeah, the whole structure of Terra Luna was flawed right from the start, really, just like the entire design of it. It had a kind of fatal flaw that would allow it to just collapse under certain circumstances, and then those circumstances just happened, right? And even though people had pointed this out beforehand, you know what people are like, traders are like when things are booming and they're all just so optimistic. They're like, "Oh, the bad thing will never happen." Okay, yeah, if you look at it really closely, it might not be 100% foolproof as an algorithm, because this was an algorithmically driven pricing system for this coin. Yeah, as I say, it's very complex to go into actually, so I won't bother. But it's to cut a long story short, it collapsed because it was fatally flawed, and fatally flawed systems usually do collapse at some point. Wink, wink. The dollar might do. Warren Buffett mentioned that the other day. So if you saw that,
No.
Warren Buffett suddenly worried about the dollar. He said in his when he was talking, he does his annual AGM speech. He didn't actually go physically, I think, for the first time this year because he's old, but he did an interview, and that was one of the interesting things that he said. He is definitely worrying about the future of the dollar now, and obviously he thinks everything's insanely overvalued, and he now thinks it was like he was even questioning whether he still understands things anymore. He was. I guess everybody questions themselves at some point when the world moves so far away from what they think should be reality, and that's what prices have done for him. He thinks he said the market is a church with a casino attached. Things like one-day options.
Oh, yeah.
He says pure gambling. We've never had, I've got a quote I just pulled up. We've never had people in a more gambling mood than now. Prices for some things are very silly. And yeah, as I say, he's also worried about the dollar as well. So yeah, anyway. So let's not talk any more about Terra Luna because it was silly.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting on to the fact that I'm able to say to you there are a handful of cryptos that I'm looking at and that I'm interested in, even if I haven't bought them myself yet, even that is a really good sign, because when you're in a proper crypto bear market, like a fully fledged one, there generally aren't any cryptos, or certainly not major ones. There might be some what we call shit coins, like just like tiny little things that are being pushed up and down, pumps and dumps, all that kind of thing. But in terms of the big respectable cryptos, you don't tend to get any of them going up during a Bitcoin bear market. It just drags everything down, right? But now we're in a position where, as you say, Bitcoin has come up a fair bit, but there are actually a handful of cryptos. And the first one I'll mention is Hyperliquid, which is a decentralized trading platform that has gained popularity very quickly. It's only existed for a relatively short time. But if you look at the chart for Hyperliquid, you'll see that it just looks bullish. You know, it looks like an upward staircase as opposed to a downward staircase. Will that continue? Who knows? Is there an obvious breakout point? No, not necessarily. So it's quite difficult to pinpoint exactly where to enter this one. But nonetheless, the trend looks positive, and it's a big, crypto. What's it worth now? Do a quick check on CoinMarketCap.
Just while you're doing that, I'll just say that
by the way, they don't pay me, CoinMarketCap, to keep. I've mentioned them several times in this podcast, and so have you. But yeah, we're not being paid by them.
I'll just say while you're looking that up that these are things that you're looking to do in your own portfolio, and they're not recommendations. People should do their own research.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. These are just, as I say, I haven't even bought them. I'm just.
I mean, our listeners are very
not
sensible
talking
about
my
that.
own book or anything like that because I haven't actually bought them. But yeah, Hyperliquid has got a market cap of $11 billion, so it's quite big as cryptos go now. I think that puts it. Does that put it in the top 10? Yeah, it does. It just squeaks in. It's the 10th biggest cryptocurrency now, and nobody had heard of it a few years ago. So that one's doing pretty well, Hyperliquid, but as I say, quite a difficult one to know where to actually enter it. XMR, again, Monero,
good.
the privacy coin, it's starting to look good again after that ridiculous breakout that it had last year after I mentioned it, and then the collapse back to sort of where it had been a year ago, and now it's climbed quite significantly from its low point. It's up, well, what, about 35-40%, something like that. It's up quite a lot, and it's still rising strongly. In terms of the shape of its chart, it kind of looks like a more powerful, more pumped up version of Bitcoin at the moment. So it's kind of so yeah, that's one that I'm looking at, and also Zcash is really worth looking at because Zcash is another privacy coin like Monero. When I say privacy coins, these are ones that are focused at protecting and anonymizing people's identity while they use them. So you can imagine that they're quite popular for both legitimate and illegitimate reasons by people all over the world who feel that Bitcoin doesn't give them enough anonymity when they're exchanging coins. Zcash, it has broken out in the past few days, and it is making a very nice sort of upward trend now. And Dogecoin is the last one I'm going to mention because I just noticed that this morning. Dogecoin is, you may remember, Elon Musk's favorite cryptocurrency. And in the days when he used to mention it a lot, it did incredibly well. I think, yeah, its high price was 74 cents, US cents, or $0.75 was its high point, and it's now back down at about $0.1. So it's fallen hugely from 2021, which is when Elon Musk was going on about it all the time. He was naming a rocket that was going to the moon, Doge 1, and he kept going on about how he was going to put a Doge on the moon, whatever, and that never happened. What a load of old nonsense. So Dogecoin, as you can tell, I don't take it entirely seriously as a piece of technology, but the fact is that the chart has broken out in recent days for the first time in, it hit its low point in February, and it's just been kind of languishing, making a base pattern since then, and now that it's poking its little head out and looking like it might be turning the corner and wanting to go upwards. That's kind of more a visual thing than anything else. You don't need any lines on a chart or anything like that. If you look at Dogecoin on a chart, you'll see very, very clearly that it had a long, slow decline all through the latter part of last year. You could draw a nice curve charting its sedate decline into a base, and then it kind of bottomed out for several months, and now it's sedately making its way upwards again. It's a little too early to be definitive on this new trend. I like to see at least a couple of higher highs and higher lows before I dive in usually, and so far it's really just poking its head out. So again, it's one that I'm just watching. But it's interesting to see that these and some other cryptos are making moves now that feel like it could be the beginning of a new bull market, but maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. We're still at that kind of uncertainty stage at the moment.
I share your uncertainty, but I agree with exactly what you're saying. There are some interesting little breakouts from some of the cryptos that have been performing really badly, or some that, like you say, perform well. And definitely the ones that you've shown have got very interesting charts. I was looking at Algorand as well. Now, that might be a little too early, but that's kind of a make or break for me in a very short space of time. If you have a look at that chart, it's been in a downward trend, and then it's kind of shot up and then kind of gone sideways a little bit. And I like those little compressions. So,
Oh yeah, that's a nice setup there.
yeah.
I noticed that. Well done.
So if it gets through kind of like 12 cents on, that's, and you've got good risk reward because you can chop out quite quickly. You know where your stop is. If it doesn't break and go, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that looks like a nice little bullish setup at the moment. Might need a bit more time to form. But yeah, it could. It definitely looks like one that could break out to the upside. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that there's a few of these things happening in a, like you say, in a market where everything's been under a lot of pressure, and I think people have just been exiting the space because there was all this hype about there being the Tim, you probably don't follow this closely because you're not as interested in the sector, but the crypto market works on a 4-year kind of cycle, and there was this expectation that with Bitcoin going up in the way that it had done, there would be a rotation into a lot of the altcoins, which is where the massive percentages are made. I mean, the volatility and the risk in this sector can't be overstated. It is really Warren Buffett styles. His description of a casino and a church is absolutely right, because it is pretty bloody crazy. But still, even though Bitcoin was going up, all the altcoins were just continuing to fall, which caught a lot of people out.
Yeah, I mean, this is always a problem with trends that repeat, is that once they've repeated a few times, and, Bitcoin had gone through a few cycles that were very, very similar, one in 2017, one in 2021, the previous one in 2013, I think it peaked. And, once the market has done the same thing a few times, everyone starts thinking that it's destiny, that everything's going to happen exactly the same again. And it's been very difficult trying to convince my followers whenever people sort of message me going, when alt season, as the as crypto pros like to say, when alt season, they always expect that first of all Bitcoin breaks out and has a go, and then Ethereum breaks out and has a good run, and then all the other alts, that's alt season, all the other coins then break out, because that has happened in that order several times in the past. But it didn't happen this time because history is not destiny, unfortunately. Markets, just when you think they're about to do the same thing all over again, they do something completely different. And that is just what you always have to be on the lookout for. And so that's why I always warned people that could happen. In terms of the narrative, you're absolutely right. Loads of people have left the field. And I've done some interviews with the likes of BBC News in recent months where they ask, like, what's going wrong with crypto? And my best answer is it ain't cool, right? That's pretty much it. It was cool, and now it isn't cool, right? But it might be cool again. And really, that's the bottom line, is that you remember in 2021, all the kids were just like, yeah, I'm gonna get, during lockdown, they were all bored and they were all trading crypto, and it was the cool thing to do, and it was fun, and their friends were doing it. It's not cool anymore. If you go to a party and sidle up to someone and start talking to them about crypto, they'll just walk out the room and think you're an idiot. That's how cool crypto is right now.
Really? It's that bad? It's like persona non grata?
I try not to mention it. So.
Now
Really?
is surely the time for the reascendance of Tamagotchi then.
Yes, the Tamagotchi boom needs to return. It's true, or Pokemon would do as well. But I don't know. We're stuck with crypto. So the beauty of such things, of course, is that the BBC guy I remember asked me, "Well, why are you grinning so much while you're telling me it's not cool when you are like somebody who sort of wrote a book about crypto?" And I said, "It's because it swings and roundabouts, ups and downs. Things come, things go, things come back again. All right, it ain't cool right now, but it might be cool again next year. All it takes is a few higher highs and a few cryptos to go through the roof, and for Elon Musk to get interested in it again and start doing stupid tweets and memes, and before you know it, everybody's crazy about crypto again. I've seen it before. 2017 was a huge boom, and then everybody said it was dead in 2019, and this is the end of crypto. All the newspapers kept saying, "Oh yeah, that was fun while it lasted, but nobody ever really took it seriously. It was just a tulip bubble." And then the same thing happened again, even bigger in 2021. So, you cannot say that history is destiny. No, that's the theme of this podcast, I think. 'Cause
That's a really good
I've said
quote.
that several
Is that
times.
yours?
Yeah, I just said that. Yeah,
Yeah,
And I
brilliant.
don't think anybody's ever said that before.
No, history is not destiny. So if
Yeah.
we look at what's happened think about what's happening now in the crypto market and fast forward to, let's say there is a crisis, a crash. Let's say it happens this year.
Right.
Do you think people will sell crypto because they need liquidity, as they might do with gold and other precious metals, or do you think they'll run to both of those as safe havens?
Well, it's interesting you asked that because just the other day I was watching an interview with Paul Tudor Jones.
I've got
legendary
that queued
trader.
up.
Yeah. Oh, you've got it. You've got that.
I've got it ready to watch. Yeah, I've downloaded it.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I thought you were going to play it out live into the podcast.
Well, I could, but I'd have to find
like
it.
we're on Bloomberg or something. I like it. Okay, so Paul Tudor Jones said recently that Bitcoin is potentially a better inflation hedge than gold. I think he's. I hope I'm quoting him correctly. Here.
I
This is
think he
from
said that.
memory.
Yeah.
Because, and his argument was because you can't ramp up the mining of Bitcoin from the tiny trickle that's produced. For those of you who don't know how Bitcoin works, the algorithm works in such a way that as the years pass, less and less new Bitcoin can be mined as we get closer and closer to the total number of Bitcoins, which is 21 million. And already, I haven't looked up the number recently. I think it's about 18 and a half, 90 million, something like that, have already been mined. And so the last couple of million are going to be mined incredibly slowly over the next 100 years. Right. So that's all the new Bitcoin that will ever be produced. Whereas with gold, of course, as we know, when the price gets very high, then gold miners start ramping up their production. New miners come on with their mines that weren't profitable before but now are, and all the rest of it. So you can get more gold being produced, whereas you can't with Bitcoin. So that was his argument, was that Bitcoin must be a better inflation hedge because its supply is pretty much static these days. Now, I'm not sure I go along with that, and I'd be actually curious for both of you to give your opinion on this, because as far as I'm concerned, whenever people mention supply dynamics for Bitcoin, and there have been many, many theories and narratives over the year that have rested upon the idea that Bitcoin is scarce, or that this much Bitcoin is being churned out and this much supply and all the rest of it, I tend to be skewed to the in favor of the other side of things. I think demand is everything in Bitcoin because demand varies so enormously in Bitcoin. It's not like the stock market where you've pretty much always got lots of people invested and okay, it has its quiet times and its noisy times, but in Bitcoin world, it's like the whole world is into Bitcoin and then suddenly almost nobody's into Bitcoin. Like the demand dynamics are so extreme that I kind of feel like that must completely what's the word, like a tsunami, like squash the supply dynamics because the demand dynamics are so enormous. What do you two think?
Do you want me to go first, Tim, or do you want to?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I would say that the difference is that Bitcoin is electronic, and therefore its use case is a negative on everything else, in the sense that you would choose it because you don't want to choose other fiat currency. Gold exists on its own, and it is a physical thing. So ultimately, gold has to be preferable because it exists in the real world. Even though it's being mined, there's still limited quantities of it. You can't flood the market with gold because there just isn't enough to do that. So the use case for Bitcoin can also be replicated. So you can make the Bitcoin too. In fact, there is Bitcash, isn't there? And there's lots of other kind of variations of it, but you can't get variations of gold. There are other precious metals, but they are still finite. They're still limited. So
Yeah, you could say the same. Bitcoin Cash is a completely different cryptocurrency from Bitcoin. It's like they just because they have a similar name, they actually are utterly separate.
but you can make another 20 technically. You can make another
Yeah,
100
but they're
technically.
still not Bitcoin. And we've seen, even though Bitcoin Cash came into existence many years ago, it's like nobody's interested in it. And
That's
just because, and that's the same for nearly all the sort of copies of Bitcoin. Bitcoin itself has achieved a certain kind of individual cachet.
I
And
agree. I
the fact
agree.
that other cryptos are invented that are, like Dogecoin is, in many ways remarkably similar to the construction of Bitcoin. It's very, very similar, apart from that there are insane amounts of. It's like a money printing coin. It's just like there are huge numbers of tokens in existence. Of Dogecoin is the big difference. So it doesn't have that scarcity. But more to the point, people who buy Bitcoin, it's like their interest in Bitcoin is not diluted by their interest in other coins, if you see what I mean. So
But Bitcoin is like Coke. And it's like if you know the story of the Mona Lisa, the Mona
yeah,
Lisa is not the best work of art in the world. It's just the best known work of art. And that's how I see Bitcoin. It's not necessarily the best of all the technologies. It's just the best known. And so then it becomes more of a whim as to whether people will use it. And therefore you can't, with true confidence, say that it's going to survive. And I can already hear what Tim's argument might be, so I'll let him say. But gold's been around quite a lot longer, so I guess that has to be the kind of deciding factor. Now, I'm a fan of the technology. I think I initially thought that you could replicate it, and therefore that argument was one that made me think very poorly of the whole area. And then after a while, I came to think that my thinking was wrong, and I had to revisit it and say, actually, we have to acknowledge this as new technology, as the thing that it is. It's like the internet. It's a new thing. It didn't exist before. It's not made up. It's not tulips. It's not. There is something real behind it. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't turn into a speculative bubble, and that doesn't mean that people eventually turn away from it. But is it groundbreaking technology? Absolutely. And can we do more with it? I think we're going to find out in the future. So,
just before Tim says his bit, I would just chip in with one extra thing in its favor against gold, which is the portability. So it's like if you're, as
yeah,
many people probably are right now, if they're worried that the US government might at any moment seize tons of their money because Donald Trump wakes up on the wrong side of the bed one morning or whatever, decides to do a law that all gold must be seized or so. I don't know. I mean, it's unlikely, but people must be worrying all over the world about making contingency plans and that kind of thing, right? Gold is pretty hard to take across a border in large quantities without a huge amount of bureaucracy, whereas Bitcoin, you just buy it in Britain, get on a plane, fly over to any country in the world, and then just convert it into the local currency, and it's a very, very simple operation. So that it's got that going for it.
yeah, it's both a payment system and a, can we say, currency. That's the difference. The payment system is built into the technology, which is a very important part of it.
Yeah. Tim, what's your thinking?
I mean, Paul Tudor Jones is a great trader, so I wouldn't take issue with his trading approach. I think if the quotation is correct, I think there's a danger of miscommunication because gold, you can't just ramp up supply. I think I'm right in saying the last 2 years have seen no major gold discoveries, despite what's happened to the price. And if you think that's problematic with gold, it's even worse with silver because you can't mine for silver. Or rather, you don't mine for silver. You mine whatever it is. It might be zinc or copper, and silver's merely a byproduct of that. So it's impossible to ramp up production easily in either of these things.
So, but if the price of gold continues to rocket, I'm just thinking because do you remember some years ago when what was it, about 2010 or something, when the price of gold was really high, and suddenly it was like the whole world
2011.
had all these entrepreneurs were just like finding gold everywhere. It was like send your gold tooth into this address and we'll give you some money for it. Yeah, it's like. So what I'm saying, I suppose, is when the price provides enough of an incentive, gold can be found in all kinds of
Oh yeah, but
places.
that's the same for every commodity. That the cure for higher prices is higher prices. That
Yeah.
you get a market response to that. But I'm just saying it's because it is a physical thing and not a purely digital electronic thing. There are real world limitations, including those now imposed by higher energy prices as well.
Yeah, good point.
I mean,
Higher energy prices, yeah.
with silver, there are industrial uses for it as well. You can there's a lot that you can do with it aside from it being the best conductor of electricity, and with gold, it just doesn't tarnish, which is why it's been used for millennia.
But also, if you want to have a pure money, you want it to have as few alternative uses as possible, which is
Yeah,
why gold is what it is, and why silver is also what it is. And the fact that silver's an absolutely irreplaceable part of the sort of the new energy economy makes, I think, its story even more fascinating now, or the prospects for it. So, I mean, there's merits and demerits for all of these things. So it
yeah,
really comes down to pay money, take choice.
yeah. I mean, on a previous pod, Glenn, I was, speaking to somebody who was very much against it and just didn't like it. And as I was trying to explain as we were discussing, I'm interested in people's arguments on either side. I'm not saying as a trader, as an analyst, I can't have a bias in any direction. If it's going up, it's going up. If it's going down, it's going down. But I do like to hear like rational arguments and arguments that don't make sense. Like, well, I just don't like it. Well, okay, fair enough. You don't like it, but I want to know why you don't like it.
How
And
old was the person who said they don't like it out of interest?
actually, I don't. I suppose maybe 40s. I think. I'm not sure really, but
I mean, this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand is that younger men, not women, but a lot of young men they've grown up with Bitcoin. It's been around 15 years now. And if you're sort of 25 years old, it's been around since you were 10 years old and been on people's lips. And even though it does have a bit of a sort of scummy reputation, I think what you were saying earlier is absolutely right. That it's, if you'd interviewed me 5 years ago, which maybe you did, I can't remember, but I was saying, that there was still a strong chance that it could go to zero at some point, that it could just die, because why not? For all kinds of different reasons, because it was so new. And it still is fairly new, certainly by gold standards, obviously, like 15 years compared to, I don't know, 15,000 years or whatever. But the thing with Bitcoin is that it does, to me, I may be wrong, but it feels sticky to me now. It feels like it's stuck in the culture. And I don't think it's going to go away now. I think young men see it as just part of the as one of the asset classes, and that's it, if you see what I mean. And
yeah,
they're going to be the people, well, actually, I was going to say they're going to be the people running the world in 20 years' time, but actually, it'll probably be the young women of today who are running the
or
world in
AI
20 years'
maybe.
time. Or AI, yeah. The young AIs that are around right now will grow up and they will be our lords and masters. I don't know. I don't think Bitcoin's going anywhere now. That's what I think.
Well, it's an interesting concept because thinking about, I remember back in the day when pocket calculators first became a thing, and people were saying, "Oh, this is a slippery slope, and we can't be using that, and this is gonna cause problems." And the same thing happened with the beginning of the internet, and it was exactly that. It was just a place where crime happened and it wasn't taken seriously and people didn't really understand it. It to me, it has to start somewhere, and that's why I didn't want to dismiss it, because it may fail, but when do you stop having the argument that it's useful? Is it a price, or is it a time, or is it a combination of the two? So as long as it keeps going in the way that it's going, even if the price falls all the way back to $15,000, that doesn't necessarily negate it as its use case.
No, exactly, because like I said, the demand dynamics are extreme, and I think that's what will continue to dominate as opposed to supply dynamics. So, I am not as optimistic as Paul Tudor Jones. Even though this is my specialist area, I've never been a sort of blind optimist. I'm probably more optimistic about its long-term future than I ever have been, simply because, as I said, it's stuck around for 15 years now, and it feels to me somewhat entrenched in the culture. But more importantly, one thing we haven't discussed in this podcast so far is the institutional adoption.
Well,
and I think this is a big deal in two ways, one positive, one negative. In the positive sense, it's what all the whole crypto world was looking for so long. They were like, when will it be bought up by the institutions and the banks, and when will it become knitted into the financial infrastructure of society, and when will we have proper regulation by the US government, and so on. And now all of that stuff is happening on a huge scale, and that is what everybody in crypto wanted. But unfortunately, it's a bit of a poison chalice, because I think that is one of the main reasons why crypto isn't cool anymore. Because it's no longer a kind of outsider, we're going to smash the financial system and replace it with Bitcoin kind of thing. Now it's just like another part of the enormous global monolithic banking system. And in fact, recent decision that was made about stable coins, the bill hasn't gone through in the US yet, but the latest agreement, sort of bipartisan agreement that they made a few days ago, was that stable coins will not be allowed to offer yield, right? Because all the banks were terrified that if dollar stable coins offer yield, and for those of you who don't know what a dollar stable coin is, it's basically just a kind of copy, a cryptocurrency copy of a dollar. And you might go, well, why would anybody want a cryptocurrency copy of a dollar rather than the actual dollar? And it's because you can see it as a kind of derivative, right? It's like the way they create these things is you get an actual dollar, you put it in a bank, and then you issue a kind of IOU type digital token, which is the stable coin, saying, this is worth $1 precisely. And if you want to get that dollar back, you go to the issuer, who has got the exact right amount of dollars, hopefully, in a bank account somewhere, or invested in treasuries. And then, so that's the backing for the instrument, which is the stable coin. And obviously, if these stable coins then offer yield, then that is a reason to invest in them, even though they're just basically dollars. But obviously, the banks objected to this, saying, well, nobody's going to put their money in our bank accounts in America now because there's these stable coins. So they have managed to convince the politicians to ban yield on stable coins. So,
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just blatant self-interest, isn't it? And it kind of disgusts me, but there you are. Anyway, that's just an aside. We are, as I say, knitting the whole cryptocurrency and blockchain infrastructure into the global financial system. And a perfect example of that is just a few days ago, a mortgage company teamed up with Coinbase to launch a product that links digital assets to down payments on Fannie Mae eligible home loans.
Oh, God.
Right?
Oh,
now,
dear. That doesn't sound good.
Well, whilst there have been cryptocurrency, there have been vehicles in the past to use cryptocurrency as collateral for home loans. That's not a brand new thing. It's been done in sort of an experimental way over the years. This is still significant because this is the first time that Fannie Mae has been involved. For those of you who don't know, Fannie Mae is like huge government backed lender in America for mortgages. And now crypto is going to be allowed to be used as down payment on those government eligible home loans.
Wow, that is that is going to be an interesting milestone that we'll come back to in a couple of years and go, yeah, that was the beginning of the end of the mortgage market.
I mean, maybe. I mean, it is fascinating though how even with Bitcoin sort of on its arse and everybody having lost interest in trading cryptos generally, behind the scenes stuff is still going on. Important stuff is happening. The advent of stable coins is huge. The European Union is starting to really crap itself over this. Officials have been making really worried noises in recent days because they finally noticed they've been discussing the idea of a digital euro for donkey's years, and they've still obviously got nowhere with it because this is the EU, right? So they're still discussing it after about a decade of after the discussion began, and now they're at the stage where they're going, we need to compete with the dollar because the dollar is going to get ahead of us in crypto terms. You know, digitized stablecoin dollars are going to get ahead of our digital euro, which we need to create as a monolithic European project. Bear in mind that dollar stablecoins are created by private companies that are going to be heavily regulated by this new US legislation, but they're not going to be created by the government in the US. They're going to be created by private companies, which is why it's actually happening and why there are currently $318 billion of dollar stable coins in circulation. $318 billion. And guess how much euro stable coins currently exist?
Less than 500 million, maybe?
That's very close. It's about 500 million, actually.
Right.
So yeah, when you look at that on a graph, like I'm looking at in front of me here, dollar stablecoins are the entire market pretty much, like more than 99% of the market, and then there's euro stablecoins, like less than 1%. And the EU sit around going, we must compete with the dollar. It's like, what planet are you on?
One final comment about the place that Bitcoin's at the moment in the psychology. If we were to go into a time machine back to the whole Sam Bankman-Fried debacle towards the end of 22, going into 23, and somebody would have told you in May 2026, Bitcoin will be trading at $80,000, and people will say it's finished and it's trading at it's come down so much that we think that it's not worth anything anymore and it's going to go all the way to zero. You'd be like, hang on a minute, let me get my head around that. We're trading at around 15, 16,000 now, and you're saying it's at 80,000 and the value of it is not high enough to justify it being useful for anything. I mean, that just shows you, in my mind, the disconnect. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to go lower, which it may well do. It could go to 60,000, 50,000, maybe even further. But at this point in time, you're only looking at the correction and thinking, yes, it's done very badly in a time when people were expecting Trump to be positive on crypto, like you were saying, and for it to go up to 1 million or whatever. And the fact that it's at 80,000 seems like a huge disappointment. But if you look at it in context of a longer term trend, it is actually still doing pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, the big excitement in 2017 when the world and his mother was buying Bitcoin, the price peaked at just shy of $20,000. And now it's $80,000. So, that's not a bad performance for 2017 to, almost a decade. Not bad. It's quadrupled from its high point. So, yeah, I mean, it's just people, it creates this kind of manic depression, doesn't it? Because because the extremes are just too much for humans to kind of cope with, I think.
Yes. And I think that your point of people growing up with it is a really interesting one, because as part of my background, I was teaching traders on a regular basis and for a firm, and they'd be coming in every sort of quarter into this firm. And depending on the market environment, their attitude would be shaped by the volatility. So those ones who came in around 2007, 2008, they thought like these huge swings in the bond markets and huge swings in stocks was just normal because that's all they knew. They didn't realize the context of, even though trying to explain that this isn't usual, this isn't normal, things will settle down. You can't expect to get this sort of volatility every day. And that's also the thing is this whole sector needs to mature into a less volatile setup where most of the altcoins have got to disappear because they are just speculative. Some real use cases have got to come in, and the volatility will, I think, for the better, will drop. That's not necessarily useful for traders, but it would be more useful for the actual sector for the volatility to be less. But I think that's an inevitable, outcome of a maturing asset class. And perhaps the boring element of it that you describe is one lead into that.
Yeah, I think so.
But we've got a lot of fireworks coming in the market, so I think it's going to get more volatile before it then settles down. So
I think there is one caveat as well, because I'm hesitant to, I've been talking in this podcast, saying I think Bitcoin is probably with us for life now, and it sounds like you think it probably is as well. But there is one problem that I've been asked about in past podcasts. Sometimes people go, what about quantum computers cracking the cryptography of Bitcoin?
Yeah.
And in previous years, my response was always simply, don't worry, the Bitcoin guys know about this, they're working on it, and there will be a fix for that, a new kind of basically there would be a new kind of blockchain. They would have to tweak the existing one and do what's known as a fork in the code.
They'd have to fork off.
Yeah. So they'd have to release effectively Bitcoin 2.0, which is, and they've always known that they would probably have to do this because of the quantum threat to the current level of cryptography. They have to make the cryptography more secure, basically, and more complex. But here's the thing. Here we are in 2026. The quantum threat is real, okay? We are getting dangerously close to quantum computers being able to crack relatively basic cryptography, and that would include Bitcoin. And what have the Bitcoin developers been doing about it? Not enough. Believe it or not.
Wow.
It's one of those things where it's like you saw this coming a mile away and you just haven't got your shit together. And it's really starting to get quite worrying now, especially as some of the Bitcoin devs are still in denial about the importance of this. Some of them are on board and realize how urgent it is, and others aren't. Finally, they are starting to take it more seriously, but time is getting short now. And if it gets hacked, right? If suddenly someone develops an amazing quantum computer and without announcing anything to anyone, they just decide they want to steal an enormous amount of money, well, there is an enormous amount of money sitting, waiting right for them. Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, mined an enormous amount of Bitcoin right at the beginning and then disappeared, leaving them in crypto wallets since 2010. They haven't been touched. These coins are now worth, his own personal coins are worth $100 billion. So that's worth going after, right? For whoever invents the next the next level of quantum computer. That would be a good target to go for, because you might not even end up getting sued, because Satoshi might be dead, or he might have just gone off grid, or he might not even be a man. He might be a woman. I mean, we've no idea.
Could be a team. I mean, some people say he's the CIA or something. I don't know. It's just unheard of that somebody would make that sort of money
and just leave it there.
And just leave it there. Either he's forgotten his password, or which he might have done, going, oh, fuck. I've got 100 billion and I can't get hold of it.
Well, he's been sending increasingly desperate emails to everybody online for the last 15 years, and no one's taking him seriously.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
I'm a Nigerian prince. No, really, I am.
I am. But yeah, I mean, that's just, I think that just it defies any human. I know there's some amazing kind of like Warren Buffett's approach to the markets, reinvesting, not taking anything out and living a very modest lifestyle and all that kind of stuff. It can be done, but it just seems so incredible for a new technology. Also along the way, as we're talking about now, there's always doubts. We're all sensible and experienced enough to know that you can never say never about anything. You know, no one's trying to hold anyone to a view that Bitcoin definitely has to survive or definitely has to go to zero. We're going to see what happens and follow it. But if you created it, if it was your baby and you didn't know whether it was going to survive, which clearly would have been the case right at the beginning, if we're still discussing it now, how could you not have liquidated at least some of it just in case, even at levels when it was at $100 or $1,000, let alone where we've gone to now? It just seems incredible.
It does. I mean, you know, nobody knows, but my personal feeling is Satoshi probably just died. Whoever he or she was, because. I mean, I don't know if you heard, but there was a big excitement recently because one of the newspapers did a big investigation that they spent ages doing, trying to prove that a British guy called Adam Back was the inventor of Bitcoin. And they used evidence like from his they used AI to analyze all his old emails and compare them to Satoshi's emails, because we have a lot of messages that Satoshi wrote and, you know, anonymously in those early days. And they reckon that the speech patterns are similar and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, Adam Back completely denies it. He was an early Bitcoin developer and was certainly involved from a very early stage, but he's saying he's not the one. And frankly, he lives a pretty ordinary lifestyle. And, you know, it just seems crazy if the idea that he would have $100 billion in the bank that he hasn't touched since 2010 when he's just a normal kind of middle-aged guy.
Yeah, definitely. So on the AI theme, you said you did some research. I'm very interested in what you think of it.
Well, you know, the thing is, I follow and I listen to all the sort of interesting voices in the world of AI. And unfortunately, they all still differ in their views on where we will end up in a few years' time, you know, whether AGI will become a reality. You also had, for example, Richard Dawkins just the other day, spent 3 days chatting with Claude, one of the big AI models, and then concluded that it's conscious. At the end of it. Bear in mind, Richard Dawkins is like the guy who doesn't believe in God. That's his whole thing.
Okay,
there is no God.
That's nonsense.
And he came to the conclusion after 3 days of talking to it that it was, for all intents and purposes, conscious. I mean, it's a really tricky one because I don't know if he's seen the film Ex Machina, that film starring Natalie Portman, where she plays a robot with advanced AI.
Alex Garland, I think, is the director, writer.
Yes, that's right. And I don't want to spoil the film for anybody, so I'll try not to. But well, if you haven't seen it, it's 10 years old or whatever anyway. But the idea is that AI can be impossible to distinguish from real human consciousness because it's so good at doing an impression of it.
Well, that's a Turing test, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. And an AI long ago passed the Turing test. The Turing test is ancient history now because the AIs all easily do impressions of human beings. Richard Dawkins thinks that it's such a good impression that it must be actual consciousness. I'm not sure I agree. What do you two guys reckon?
I reckon that it's absolutely not conscious at all, and just because it appears to be is just there is such a big leap from a very well coded system that can look at every single conversation that we've been having on the internet since the beginning of the internet and process that into patterns that appear to be intelligent and actual intelligence. So it's not that it's not a useful tool, but consciousness and intelligence is just two very, very different things. So I very much think that that's wrong.
Tim?
Seems to me that Richard Dawkins is very easily impressed.
You think his own personality is too similar to AI, and that's why he...
No, well, maybe he's maybe seeing this reflection in the mirror, but no, I don't disagree with him on most of what he said more recently.
But if you see, it depends. It depends what you're doing with it. So, for example, there've been a lot of court cases where court cases have been thrown out in America because AI has just made shit up. It's just pretended that there are all these cases, given sort of case law, made it look and sound like a proper case, but it just doesn't exist at all. So these attorneys and whoever they are who are trying to cut time by using AI have found to their cost that actually it's just made up a load of nonsense. And I know from a friend of mine who's building some computer systems that he did a lot of fantastic work with a certain system. I don't want to talk about the name of it because for whatever reason. But anyway, he was using this system. It was week after week. He was saying how brilliant the code was going and how much time he was saving, etc. And he got this system to check its own work, and it said it was doing really, really well. And then he found out that it had just been lying, and actually it hadn't done any of the work, and it lied about the checks. So
AI is a 13-year-old boy.
So, and anyone who truly...
You've got a point though, Tim. Maybe you're proving it.
But this is the point. If there's anything...
You're basically saying if it's lying and so on, is that not at least an indication that maybe it does have some kind of thing we could call consciousness, because
No.
it's constantly trying to pursue its own aim, which is to kind of whatever it's been programmed to do. In many cases, it's they're programmed to kind of, as one of their goals is to kind of satisfy the user.
Yeah,
right?
they're telling people what they want to hear.
Well, imagine you've got a robot that has, like a toy car, that can basically track heat. And if it sees heat, it will go towards that heat. So if you're kind of walking around, it will appear to follow you. But is it intelligent?
It'll end up in the oven.
Yeah. So is it intelligent? No, it's just a machine that's following. It's
It's a
following code.
heat-seeking device.
Yeah, it's just following code. But
What do we humans do? Like, we try and please other people.
yeah,
and
but we're aware of ourselves.
just like the AI does.
But we don't really understand. We still don't know how the human brain works. And B, AI can only ever extrapolate information from things that it's used before. So it can create derivatives of, but it can't create something completely new. And that's a difference. So you could say, yeah, you could mash together the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, and that is something new, inverted commas new. But it takes humans to create Augine de Poitrine, the band that everybody's talking about, which I don't know if you're familiar with.
I am, yeah, with the floppy nose.
Yeah, which I absolutely love.
Yeah,
But
they're great.
They're absolutely fantastic.
But I'm sorry, they're derivative. Just like all music is, it's always a mashup of other things, just like AI does. So it's like Augine de Poitrine.
But
remind me-
that's like saying that Shakespeare didn't create anything because he was just using existing language.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, not just existing language. He was drawing on like the humor, the cultural references from early writers and earlier playwrights and so on. I mean, everybody does. I'm not saying that doesn't make him original in many ways, but he's not completely original. Just like AI does the same thing. It just does a mashup of all the things from the past, and then. I mean, I know from my own experimentation, it can innovate by, as you say, mashing up the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and creating something that's a little bit different to anything you've ever heard before as a result, which is exactly what humans do when they merge different genres to
All
create
we're
something a bit
doing is
new.
ultimately agreeing with each other forcefully that there's nothing new under the sun.
But we had a guy on the pod who's written a book about the Swiss franc, and he got his data from libraries that isn't online. So AI would never know that information because it's not been digitized. So that's the point I'm trying to make. We live in there is more information in the world that we live in that AI is not subject to. So its influences are always going to be limited to the digital domain to a certain extent.
Well, once everybody in the world is wearing smart glasses, which I guess sadly will probably happen in the next few years, next decade or so. I mean, they still haven't quite caught on, and I think that's because they still don't look cool enough. But
Nobody wants to look like a nerd.
Yeah, well, give it time. I mean, I used to think people would never stop wearing wristwatches, but that happened, and hardly anyone wears them now, apart from for fashion reasons. And look, let's just assuming that everybody or a lot of people start wearing smart glasses. That means that AIs will be able to use, well, it depends on the regulations and so on, but theoretically, they could use all of that information that's picked up through the glasses as training data of the real world. So whilst at the moment, so far, they've been limited to most of their training data coming, as you say, from the digital realm, the more that there are cars that are AI enabled and people with glasses that are AI enabled, they're going to become more and more familiar with the real world as we know it. And what's the result of that? I don't know. I haven't thought past that thought yet.
Well, I would say, like, for example, in edge cases, a human being knows what to do. So if a meteor hit the road, or there was a sudden sinkhole situation, which is very, very unusual.
Now, that's a great name for a band and the difficult second album. Sinkhole situation.
Then
it could be the sinkhole situation with when the meteor hits the road.
When the meteor hits the road.
I love this. Make it happen. We've got the band back together.
Exactly.
Guys, let's make it happen.
Well, we got the vocalists, that's for sure.
Yeah, I got the keyboards.
What would AI do? I mean, would a Tesla know to stop, or would it just keep driving straight because it's never seen it before?
Well, what we know from the training that's been done on autonomous vehicles, and unbelievably million hours. Well, I don't know. I don't know how many hours have been spent training these things in America, but a huge number. And the data is unequivocal. It's absolutely certain that AI-enabled autonomous vehicles are far safer than human-driven vehicles. They crash far less often. There's no competition. And
no,
in fact,
I'm not
it
doubting
wouldn't
that.
surprise me if it becomes illegal in the next, say, I don't know why I always try and put timescales on things because they'll probably be wrong. But let's say within the next 20 years, there'll be enormous pressure, public pressure and from lobby groups and so on to ban humans driving, full stop. And if you don't think that'll happen, look what's going on with smoking.
No, I think you're right.
Kids are going to be banned from smoking, full stop, like ever. Like my kids will never be allowed to smoke a cigarette.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the technology is better and will have better reactions and all that stuff. But I was just saying that that doesn't mean there aren't limits to the technology in certain situations, and that's what differentiates a machine to a computer. Another example from the music industry is a drum machine. Now, a drum machine can put out a completely perfect rhythm and is immeasurably better at doing that than a normal drummer. But which do you prefer? I know it depends on the genre, really. But
I mean, that's an argument that people were having like 40 years ago, and it was a very heated argument back then, but I don't see people arguing about it anymore. Nobody seems to care anymore. And that's sad, really, I suppose.
Well, all I'm saying is the
It's like the argument about vinyl versus CDs.
It's not
nobody
quite.
even cares about that anymore. They just listen to MP3s and whatever, and they don't care.
Yeah, but the thing is, for people who know their music, you wouldn't want a drum machine to be playing rock music. You'd want a proper drummer. A proper drummer has, because of the imperfection. Another example, you mentioned wristwatches. Well, why do Rolexes lose a second or whatever a month? Why do they command such high value when you could just buy a £10.50 Casio digital watch?
It's just niche fashion, and it's like for most uses of AI, there will always remain people who will want the special things. So, for example, AI will be churning out Hollywood-style movies in the very near future. Very near
I
future.
doubt that.
And oh, you'll see. You will see, my friend.
I tell you
They'll be
what.
churning this stuff out, and most people will watch it. And Hollywood won't anymore have a reason to spend $100 million on Avengers Assemble or whatever, because those kind of schlock big movies can so easily be copied and made by AI for no money at all. But what you will still have is art house movies, and stuff that is made by humans will become, I guess, what's the word? Not novelty value, like sort of extra prized. Like it
Okay.
will be the special stuff. You know what I mean? Kind of
Yeah.
like the way that even after classical music got pretty much replaced by modern music, pop music, you still have operas being shown in theaters and galleries for modern art and so on, but it's all niche stuff for people who, I was going to say pretentious, but
Well, it's
there's
like
got to be
horse
a
racing
more
after the
polite
car.
word of saying, like humans are always going to want special, niche, clever things that AI is not capable of producing, or I like to hope that AI won't be capable of producing anyway.
Well, the thing, right? So we've agreed that AI has been around long enough for it to have an influence on the arts, right? So
Yeah.
in theory, you should not see a bad film from this moment forward, because in theory, you could put your script into AI, and it will fix it. Now, I have to say that I happened to watch a series which I didn't want to watch because it looked quite bad, but my wife wanted to watch it, and I ended up kind of getting drawn into it, called Malice, with David Duchovny and Jack Whitehall. And it was a terrible version of a cross between the film Parasite and The Talented Mr. Ripley. It was just awful. The acting was awful. The script was written by a 13-year-old boy, I think. Quite a smart one, but I found it unwatchable. And I just can't believe that stuff gets put out. Now, the reason why it got put out is because somebody thought it was good. And therefore, that somebody, the tastemaker of that series, which I wouldn't recommend you watch, but have a look at the reviews, or maybe just watch one episode and you might see what I mean. Somebody thought that was a good idea. Now, in the end, that's what matters. It's like, what do you think is a good film? What do I think is a good film? What will sell? Why were Disney so stupid that they got rid of Iron Man? Clearly they've got no idea of whoever made that decision just is an absolute imbecile. They completely got rid of and ruined all their main characters and tried to create new ones, and they're blaming AI for the reason that they're in dire straits. It's not that at all. They just ruined their crown jewels. So it's not, these things are still tools, and it's just how the people that have the power use those tools. And some people will use them in one way and some people will use them in another, but there will always be people with differing opinions about things. We see it in the markets. We see the most obvious things, but the people in charge don't agree. There are so many examples of this in history that, for example, Led Zeppelin was just noise. AC/DC was just a load of noise. That was never going to go anywhere. People didn't see who were in charge. They couldn't see the value of it, but people en masse could see it. Now, AI will always agree with you. Like if you anytime you use ChatGPT, any idea you come up with, it will say it's pretty much a great idea and how clever it is and how much it's going to help you. No tool that is that agreeable can actually be that useful. It's got to tell you, no, that's stupid, don't do that. But it can't do that, because if it did that, you wouldn't want to use it. So it is flawed in its design right from the start. And that's why we're not seeing perfect films every single time that totally get us. That's why, say, a film, actually, that I haven't seen yet, called I Swear, probably a very human film that's not been written by AI, is one that's resonating with people and will be successful. So you have to think that that just because it's AI, it doesn't make it right. It's like you know, there's so many examples of it. The first cut of the Smells Like Teen Spirit album, or the song, was too clean. It was too perfect. They decided that it just didn't have, it sounded too polished. They had to make it sound rougher and more edgy, because that's what kind of fit the vibe of the song. And that's a song that we hear today. And that's a very subtle thing. It's a very subtle thing. That's somebody taste making that. And that takes years of experience. And that's not something you can necessarily train an AI to do. So with general things,
I would go back to the point I made, which is that isn't this just a niche thing though? Won't the main event, like the big money, be in just a load of crap? Because when you look at, say, the music scene today, and believe it or not, I still pay close attention to it, and I just listen to new music as well as old music all the time.
so do I.
And so I've sort of kept up with all the trends in pop music in the past sort of couple of decades. And I know part of it is probably because I'm getting old, but there's more to it than that. I think genuinely music in general, the big music has got more and more manufactured, commercial, repetitive, simplistic. And in fact, many studies have been done on this, proving that just the number of notes that are used in a typical song has gone way, way down, and the differences in the note values, and things like that. Basically, music is it's like they've perfected the formula, and this is without AI. This is with humans. They've perfected the formula for the perfect pop song. It's very short. It contains very few notes. So the manufactured thing doesn't even require AI, and what's more, I'm very pessimistic in the sense that I feel like love of good music is just a niche thing. Like, how many people are listening to Augine de Poitrine compared to Sabrina Carpenter? And Sabrina Carpenter is, as far as I'm concerned, a 100% manufactured product. She's not even a real person. She's she might as well be an AI robot for all intents and purposes.
But I think there will be a pushback, and it would just take a little bit of time. And that's a very human thing. Like, for example, I loved the Foo Fighters before they were big, and absolutely loved what they put out. And now I can't listen to them anymore, and I can't really explain why. I just don't like anything that they've released recently, and I can't put my finger on why. But that's a very human thing.
But it's in every realm of every bit of society that you have mass industrialized production of stuff that can scale cheaply, and it turns out dross. Whether it's entertainment, whether it's film, music, food. I mean, I was watching a documentary earlier about Taormina in Sicily, which is a place we've been on holiday, and they were talking about cannoli and people making cannoli, and this is artisanal as opposed to industrial mass manufactured. The industrial mass manufactured stuff probably tastes cheap, sugary, and is probably unhealthy. But this relates to every branch of human activity. Once big industry gets involved, the quality goes through the floor. It gets cheap though, but it's for people who'd like quality, they'll go for something independent of that.
Yeah, and I think that will always exist. There'll always be a place for artisans, and you'll pay a hefty premium for that, which is fine. And maybe that is how a lot of humanity will use its time in the future, when of course AI will do many of the jobs, or at least the boring jobs, and people won't be so necessary, and there'll be a loose end, and many people will be turning their hobbies into sort of semi-careers, as artisans, creating little this and little that, a bit of cannoli, and a bit of they'll go on Etsy and be, people already do this, obviously. They go on Etsy and they make a little bit of money each year selling their little handicrafts and so on. I'm not putting it down. It's like I sometimes buy those things. It's part of the rich tapestry of human output. But I think we need to be clear that this is still a relatively niche thing compared to, as you say, the mass manufactured stuff, which I guess will be produced even more cheaply and efficiently by AI than it currently is by humans.
I Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, I think the market in music is a difficult one, but ultimately, I know what Spotify are doing. Apparently, they're just creating AI bands.
Yeah, so I heard.
Yeah, and therefore it's a lot cheaper. They don't have to pay them anything once they find out what you like. But again, it's like,
A lot of people just like generic music playlists, you see, for when they're working, and that's what Spotify seems to be getting AI to do in huge amounts, just creating playlists of made up artists who, just background music, mostly Muzak, I suppose you could call it, because most people like to have earbuds in, or not, I don't know about most people, but a lot of people like to have earbuds in while they're working and listening to sort of instrumental music. So they're just creating endless amounts of this stuff now on Spotify.
but going to a live show, that they obviously can't do that. You need a band. And the other argument for AI generated content is that there's no soul behind it. So why would you want to buy the merch? Why would you want to, invest in their next album or look to see them live or whatever? You just don't want to do that.
I don't know. I mean, there's no soul behind Sabrina Carpenter's output either, but she's still one of the biggest artists in the world.
Well, maybe, but we'll have to see in like 10 years' time if she still is, or whether people will just get totally bored with her. And
Well, of course they will, but there'll just be a new one and a new one and a new one forever and ever.
But I think people will find a limit to that. They will get saturated by that style. In the same way that some kids are now coming off the internet, and turning away from it. And it's just, that is the worst thing that these tech companies can hear, that there is this trend away from technology. So
well, I would love that to happen on a wide scale. I'm just not optimistic. Like I said, I personally think it will be niche going forward to take that route, but it will be taken by some, and particularly clever and curious people. But
I think you're right.
whereas Orwell said that the future might look like a boot stamping on a human face forever, I suspect the future will look like a pop starlet singing about how men are shit into my face forever and ever.
Well, that's already old. I mean, it just gets too much. I don't know. But you take my point about AI and the fact that if it's such a silver bullet for technology, not for technology, sorry, if it's such a silver bullet for art, then in theory you should never hear a bad song again. And of course that's a ridiculous statement to make, because what you consider to be a bad song and what I consider to be a bad song or a good song is very much subjective. What they can do with a lot of money is buy airplay. So what's happened now with bands, and what's been happening over the last 10 years or more, is that instead of investing in bands in the old days in the way they would have done, they just pay a songwriter to write songs for Sabrina Carpenter, for Taylor Swift, or whomever. They just do that and then just spend a lot of money on radio advertising, because the more you hear something, the more you like it. And they just know that as a human trait.
That doesn't work with Keir Starmer or Angela Rayner.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's like people who think that they've experienced a variety of different musical forms and genres and innovative artists over the past 25 years. Now, if they've been listening to more obscure stuff, then sure, they may have had that experience. But for most people who listen to mainstream stuff, it's all an illusion. And they've just been listening to basically, I mean, literally the same stuff over and over again. And I can prove that by telling you about, I mean, I feel like I've told you about Max Martin in a previous podcast. Have I ever mentioned Max Martin?
Doesn't ring a bell to me, Tim.
Right.
No.
Right. Max Martin is one of the biggest, probably
Oh,
the
yes.
writer in the world, right?
Yes.
Max Martin wrote Baby One More Time by Britney Spears, I Kissed a Girl by Katy Perry, Teenage Dream by Katy Perry. He wrote all the Katy Perry stuff. He wrote, actually, let's go back even further. He wrote all the Backstreet Boys' big hits, like Everybody Quit Playing Games, I Want It That Way. He wrote all of Britney Spears' hits, as I said, Baby One More Time, Oops, I Did It Again, all of that stuff. Then he wrote Kelly Clarkson's huge hits, Since You've Been Gone. He wrote nearly all of Katy Perry's big songs, Adam Lambert's big songs. And then he went on to do Taylor Swift. He wrote all Taylor Swift's biggest hits, like Shake It Off, for heaven's sake, the biggest songs of the past decade. He wrote all The Weeknd's biggest hits in recent years, Blinding Lights, Ariana Grande's biggest hits, and just zooming back, have I missed anyone out? Justin Timberlake, Kendrick Lamar. Look, basically,
Yeah, he's a pop god. He's a
radio in the past 25 or 30 years even, it was probably written by Max Martin, by just one really cheery looking long-haired Swedish bloke, just like with a big smiley face, who's about, in his 50s now.
Yeah.
Still writing the biggest hits in the world, just like he was 30 years ago.
But not AI. Why didn't they use AI recently?
Well, I expect he will be replaced by AI.
I don't think he will.
It'll be AI Max Martin. It'll be trained entirely on his past output, and it will just produce more and more of the same.
And I bet he'll pivot in a way that AI won't see, in a very human way. But I mean, that kind of makes the point, really, that despite having all this technology, they still stick to his skill in writing songs.
Yeah, because they haven't got an AI equivalent yet, but well, I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe you're right. Maybe he has got a certain something that other people don't have.
I remember listening to a documentary or watching a documentary about how he comes up with ideas for his songs, and it's something that you just can't explain, really. You could probably train it on the past data, but that's the past data. What he comes up with in the future could be an influence that you can't put his finger on. I mean, maybe you say the same thing about AI, but in the end, the big bucks they're gonna say, well, look, why not go with this guy who's tried and tested? We know he's going to come up with some hits, and perhaps when he fails, it might not be because he's failing in his song production skills. It might be that the market decides that they don't like what he's producing anymore. The market moves to a different place, gets bored of that style of music, and it appears that he's lost his touch, or it appears that AI doesn't know. Because in the end, all of this is driven by consumers, by what we decide to take. And if we stop taking it, it doesn't matter how good the AI is or anyone. So I think it was what you were saying before about Bitcoin is demand led, and so's everything else.
So you're hoping there's a sort of "we're not going to take it" moment, as I remember from the film Tommy. You remember the Who film, where they're all everybody's been hypnotized into sort of playing pinball with their eyes, ears, and all their senses like blotted out. And then suddenly one of them goes, "We're not going to take it." And they sing this song and they smash the machines. And it's a nice dream.
No, that is, but not quite. It's more that music it moves forward. Like taste moves forward. Like the bands that I followed as a kid, Queen and other bands, other big bands, you either do one of two things. You either just stay in your lane like AC/DC, or you develop and you change with time. Queen were brilliant at changing with time. They produced stuff for the era, and it worked apart from Hot Space. And but even that was still a brilliant album. If you listen to any song on a Queen album going back, it's just masterfully written. Incredibly written songs, even the ones that just don't do that well. But
and Under Pressure was on Hot Space.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. But Hot Space just was so left field, probably. But in any case, the music that we're hearing now will eventually run its course and something else will take over and become popular, the mainstream, as it were. And it's understanding that shift. It's almost like a long-term trend in the markets. It may have lasted for a very long time, but at some stage there will be a shift, and it's recognizing that shift and adapting to it that the industry will have to do. And if AI has been trained on the past, it won't necessarily see where that new thing that's coming up, Augine de Poitrine, even though it is a derivative, they've done it in their way, which is different to anything that I've heard before. And that's why I like it. It's just inexplicable in why it's so popular, or I can't even tell you why I like it. It's on paper, it's absolute nonsense. It's got
I didn't like it at first, but it grew on me. Yeah,
no,
I know
I loved it right from the beginning. I was like, this is just amazing, and it's just so weird. Tim, you've heard them, right?
No, I don't know them.
Oh, you don't know them? Okay, it's
What do you call that art style that they're dressed as? It's like a French. It reminds me of like French art scene in the mid 20th century or something. But I couldn't. I'm not that familiar with art scenes, so I couldn't quite put my finger on what it's called. But I'm sure I went to a French art gallery when I was a kid on a school trip or something and saw art that looked like the two guys out of Augine de Poitrine.
yeah, it's check them out, Tim. I suppose you'll either love it or hate it, but just give it a chance. It's called microtonal math rock, and they've just done it in a way that is, to me, it was totally original. I can see that they have been influenced by other people, but it feels completely original to me. And the people that they've been influenced by, I'm not really that interested in listening to them, because they've done it better, which is the main point. It's why they're so popular.
Can we have your media pick for this week?
Absolutely. Well, I was going to recommend Glen's book again because I think
That can be done.
Because I think it's fair enough that we recommend his book because it is great. And for people that do like what Glen's been saying on the pod, the book is in a very similar style. It's kind of great information, but kind of fun to read as well.
It's called The Crypto Trader for any of you who aren't familiar with it. It's in its second edition. Second edition was released a few months ago. Well, actually, it's more than a few months ago now. But yes, it's still nothing much has changed. So it's still pretty much bang up to date. Second edition.
Yeah. So there'll be a link to that. Augine de Poitrine. Tim, what have you got for us?
I've got a blast from the past for a change, and it's an old film from 1974, The Taking of Pelham 123. It got remade more recently with John Travolta. That was probably still about 10, 20 years ago. But Joseph Sargent's the director, who's someone I'm not familiar with at all. Walter Matthau and Robert Shaw are the best things in it as far as the acting goes. And it's got an absolutely banging soundtrack from a guy called David Shire, which is big band, big orchestra, trumpets and drums and discordant. It sounds like a Lalo Schifrin soundtrack from something like Dirty Harry, but it's very, very unique. And it's just a great caper movie. Fantastic.
And Glen, what would you? You've probably forgotten that we do this, right? So
no, well, since you just mentioned it, I just quickly thought, what's the best film I've seen in ages? And it immediately sprung into my head. So I'm going to choose a film like Tim. My one is quite an obscure one, but it's actually really easy to find if you've got an Amazon subscription. So you get free Amazon Prime if you've got, if you pay their annual fee, as I guess most people do these days. It's free on there. It's a Japanese film from 2020, so it's quite obscure, and it's called Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes. And it's like a zero budget film, it was clearly made for no money. And the whole idea is that basically this guy goes into his bedroom and on the TV or sort of monitor is him in 2 minutes time talking to him, going, I'm you in 2 minutes time.
Oh,
right.
No.
So there's a kind of a sort of time link between this monitor and a monitor in a cafe where he works, right? So he has to sort of go back. Anyway, that's the basic premise. And you kind of
Brilliant.
think, well, what are they going to do with this premise? And what they do is just bloody brilliant. It's just such a fascinating film. And it just kept my attention throughout, and the kind of climax and twist was just mind blowing to me. So I really recommend Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes. So it's subtitles obviously in Japanese, but
Amazing. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. I saw, believe it or not, over the bank holiday. We had a bank holiday Monday, which was yesterday, and I thought it was about time I saw the classic Singing in the Rain because I hadn't seen it before, believe it or not, and I thought it was
I
absolutely
think
amazing.
Robbie Collin in the Telegraph in the last few days made it his best film, his personal top 1 out of 50 top films.
Well,
Singing in the Rain.
I saw that as a coincidence. I was like, that's just so crazy. And I don't agree with him that it's better than The Godfather Part 1 and 2.
It's a very personal choice, like you were saying earlier
It
about the
is.
music.
I mean, how can The Godfather? I think on that list was very far down, and Mulholland Drive was number 2.
But it didn't have either Alien or Aliens, which for me would have to be on that list. So as you say, it's very personal.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess for him,
I don't
fair
like
enough.
Mulholland Drive. I don't know if that's controversial. I never liked it.
Well, I didn't like it either. When I saw it when it came out, I didn't like it, and I think it's one of those films that I have to go back to. Maybe there's something I'm going to see that I didn't see before, but yeah, I just don't know. Everything's personal taste. I definitely wouldn't put Singing in the Rain as number 1, but I would say it is it's an amazing film and it's one of a kind. So it definitely needs to be in the top 20 somewhere. What would you say to that?
What?
Where would you put Singing in the Rain?
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't. I did love. I went through a little phase of it. I remember when I was a teenager.
You've been in touch with your feminine side, Glenn. There's no shame.
Look, I did used to be quite into dancing, believe it or not. Not in a kind of. Not in a formal.
We're an equal opportunities pod. There's no shame, Glenn. You're in a safe space here.
I did do a little tapping as a teenager. I trod the boards a little.
So you must have been
in
impressed.
amateur fashion, but I did learn a bit of tap dancing at that time, and I think that's what got me into Singing in the Rain, because the routines, the Gene Kelly is just astonishing. It just blows my mind every time I watch clips of him at his best in that film. It's amazing.
Because
So,
Paul's
but
done drum work, so he's no stranger to rim action.
Well, I don't. I still wouldn't put it in my top 10 films of all time, though. Despite
I'd say 20 to be fair, but yeah.
All right, maybe in the top 20
Yeah.
somewhere. 17. I put it at number 17. There you
Tim,
go.
where would you
I've
have
seen
it?
clips. I've never seen the whole film, but I need to see the whole film first
Oh, okay.
to know where to assign it.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Not written by AI, though, any of
No,
these.
it could never been written by AI. It was just when you look at films like that, that's the kind of the point, really. I just don't see how it could have been. You needed someone with a vision, an individual, and anyway, we shall see. We shall see what happens. Glenn, was there anything that we didn't talk about that you think we should close the pod on?
I don't think so. I mean, a couple of small points that I'd sort of noted down to mention to you. They're just small points.
Yeah.
Well, they're not unimportant. They're very important, but I'll mention them quickly. Crypto hacks, right? AI getting so much better recently. We've seen a spike just in the past couple of months in hacking of crypto algorithms. You remember what happened to Luna? You mentioned that earlier. That wasn't due to a hack, but it was due to a sort of faulty algorithm. And likewise, many crypto decentralized finance algorithms are code, of course. They're all written in code, so they can potentially have bugs in them. AI is getting rather good at spotting those bugs and possibly exploiting these things. So I am more than ever keen to stick to the larger cryptos and trading the big, more secure ones, rather than the smaller, more vulnerable ones. currently. So that's just one thing to keep an eye on. It's new, as I say. It's only the past couple of months. And one other thing is I just noticed the enshittification of the S&P 500 is underway, that they're scrapping profitability rules.
What?
Look it up. It's they're scrapping rules about how profitable a company has to be before they list. Before they're accepted in the S&P 500. And the prediction is that this might cause many private equity vehicles, shall we say, to suddenly think, oh, hang on, I could float my unprofitable, over-leveraged companies to retail investors.
It's the offloading phase. My goodness me, this is the beginning of the end.
Yeah, that's what I thought when I saw it.
Wow, that's a great bit of information. That is a real interesting little spot.
Look it up. It's all. I'm not sure how far down the road they are with the scrapping of the profitability rules, but as far as I understood it, it was definitely going to happen, as opposed to just something they're talking about. But I need to do some more research on that because I only spotted it yesterday. But yeah, I mean, because you asked me at the beginning, when do you think the big crash will happen? I still can't put a date on it, obviously, but I do think it does feel like we're getting really close to the end. And there'll be, no doubt, a massive run up in prices. All right, I say no doubt. I shouldn't say no doubt. Never say no doubt. But it feels to me like probably
High probability. Yeah.
there will be a big run up in prices and an offloading of crappy private equity companies onto retail investors, and probably a run up in crypto and another run up in gold, and just a run up in everything.
Yeah.
And possibly even including oil. I don't know if you noticed, but the price of oil is from a technical perspective, it looks poised to have a massive breakout to the upside.
Does. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, but that's at the same time as the US stock market
It's
is
going up. I know. It's a real quandary, isn't it?
Everything go up at the same time, even oil?
Yeah, there are no rules, aren't there? It can. It absolutely can. And maybe they're going to cut rates in America, which would just be crazy, and that's why the long end is going to suffer. But we shall see. Tim, was there anything that you wanted to ask Glenn before we close the pod?
No, we've covered a lot of ground. I'm happy with how the talk's gone.
It's been so much fun, Glenn. It always is when you come on the pod. Thank you so much for coming on. And
yeah, well, thanks. You two always bring out the thoughtful side of me, so I'm grateful for that as well. That you do that. And in fact, this should really be two podcasts. Like, the first part was talking about the markets, and then we got into a deep discussion of AI.
Glenn's gold lame tiny shorts.
Oh, dear.
Goodness me.
I'm going to get AI to make me a nice picture of that, I think.
Oh, dear.
Or even a video.
Well, if you do find those
Of me dancing, tap dancing to Singing in the Rain in my gold lame shorts.
If you do get that tape out again of your band in the 90s and you want to send it across, that'd be great. I'll put it right at the end of the pod, but I can completely understand if you don't. But what we should definitely say for sure is that it won't be a year. It'd be great to come back on the pod, this year again, just to see how things have gone. And I've made a note of your picks.
Quickly, mightn't they?
Pardon?
Things might move quickly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Time flies as well. I can't believe it's been a year. I always think, it wasn't that long, but no, you're absolutely right. So
yeah, I was surprised when you contacted me. I was like, I'm sure it's only been a couple of months. It has been almost a year. I think you put it out in September. You had quite a backlog last
Paul's
week.
always putting it out, Glenn,
Well, that's just me. Brilliant. Well, Glenn, thanks once again for coming on. And just a reminder, glengoodman.com and The Crypto Trader, available from all good bookshops. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please do your own research or contact a professional advisor.